outsizing grifting from a jumbo Qatari jet. This bill, with its cuts to Medicaid, by the way, almost 2 million people get their health care from it in Massachusetts alone, stands to have the broadest impact yet on Americans in Trump's second term in office. Call or text, what would these Medicaid cuts mean to you, your friends, your family?
I'm Marjorie Egan. That is NBC Sports Boston's Trenni Casey on the Celtics standing in the NBA after Friday's season-ending loss to the Knicks. A rollback of diversity as well, and initiatives in the NFL. That and more ahead. First hour of BPR 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. President Trump met congressional Republicans on Capitol Hill today. He's trying to get his party to pass what he calls the Big, Beautiful Bill. The spending legislation includes massive parts of Trump's agenda, such as tax cuts and border security. But NPR's Deepa Shivaram reports disagreements among GOP members means there's no guarantee that it'll pass.
Not all Republicans have been on board with the bill, but Trump seemed to ignore that as he walked into the Capitol, saying the Republican Party has never been more unified.
This is really just a pep talk. We have a very unified House and we have a very unified Senate.
But he was quick to then critique Kentucky Representative Thomas Massie, who has shared concern that the bill would add to the national debt. Trump said Massie should be voted out of office. House Speaker Mike Johnson has made Memorial Day the self-imposed deadline to get the legislation passed. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News.
The United Kingdom is pausing trade talks with Israel and summoning the country's ambassador. It's over the expansion of Israel's military operation in Gaza. NPR's Lauren Freyer reports from London.
UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer told Parliament the trickle of aid Israel has allowed into Gaza
is totally and utterly inadequate. So we must coordinate our response.
In addition to pausing trade talks with Israel, the UK government says it's also imposing more sanctions on settlers responsible for violence against Palestinian communities in the Israeli-occupied West Bank. Those include a travel ban on 79-year-old Daniela Weiss, who's often referred to as the grandmother of the extremist settler movement. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calls his military actions in Gaza defensive and said recent criticism from the UK, France, and Canada is a, quote, huge prize for Hamas. Lauren Freyer, NPR News, London.
The Department of Homeland Security has conducted its first voluntary removal charter flight from Texas to Honduras and Colombia. As NPR's Jimena Bustillo reports, the flights are part of the administration's push to get immigrants without legal status to leave the country.
DHS said 64 people who opted to, quote, self-deport back to their home countries were on the flight. The department called it a voluntary charter flight. They say that's different from a flight Immigration and Customs Enforcement would use for deportations. Each person also received a $1,000 stipend and, quote, preserved the possibility that they could one day return to the U.S. The administration has launched a multi-million-dollar ad campaign encouraging immigrants without legal status to leave or face arrest and detention. But immigration advocates say questions remain over how many people may trust this program. And lawyers for immigrants argue that it could discourage people who may have legitimate asylum claims from pursuing legal options to stave off deportation. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News, Washington.
On Wall Street, the Dow was down 120 points. The Nasdaq is down nearly 90. This is NPR.
Good morning. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro. Massachusetts spent nearly $145 million fighting the opioid epidemic last year. So says new research from Avalere Health, the Washington-based healthcare consulting firm. And according to Axios Boston, the research examines the economic toll the epidemic has taken, not to mention the hundreds of thousands of lives it claimed here in Massachusetts. And while opioid-related overdose deaths are declining nationwide in recent years, the research shows that Massachusetts is one of the states where opioid use disorder is most prevalent. State senators are spending the week debating their $61 billion budget proposal for the new fiscal year that starts in July. They're hoping that policies built into the spending plan can make a dent in the state's housing crunch. Roxbury State Senator Liz Miranda is championing an amendment to create a savings and education program for first-generation home buyers.
Often don't have the financial support from parents to help with down payments or other upfront costs. And this is how we begin to actually tackle the generational and racial wealth gap.
Senators are also expected to support a measure that would direct the state to explore suspending the sales tax on construction materials used to build apartments. In sports, Game 2 of Red Sox Mets tonight at Fenway Park, and it's National Dog Rescue Day. Who's a good boy? Cloudy, near 60 today, 57 in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, supporting creative people and effective institutions committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information is at macfound.org.
He is Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Yeagan. Welcome to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library. Thank you. And streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow we're going to be joined by historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. We're very excited about that. She's going to be here at the library, as well as the Attorney General, Andrea Campbell. She'll be here from 1 to 2 to take your questions and ours. And the Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu, will be here at the library on May 28th. Hello, Jim.
Hey there, Marjorie. So under the guise of reducing waste and fraud, Donald Trump is proposing massive reductions in federal funding for Medicaid, which covers 80% of children living in poverty in the country, half of adults living in poverty, and about a quarter of adults with disabilities. Let's just clarify the difference between Medicaid and Medicare, since the nation's top health expert, that'd be RFK Jr., had no idea which was which when he testified at his confirmation hearing. Medicaid is restricted to low-income people. Medicare has no income requirement, but covers people over 65 years old. In Massachusetts alone, 1.7 million people are enrolled in Medicaid. Trump's big, beautiful bill, which is inching closer to passage on the Hill, sort of anyway, calls for at least $800 billion in cuts, mostly to Medicaid. The reason for these massive cuts, you know this, to fund $4.5 trillion in tax breaks. We don't want to create unnecessary fear. We don't know what the outcome is going to be of this proposal to cut Medicaid dramatically. We clearly do know what the intention is. So the lines are open at 877-301-8970. Of all the harm Trump has caused on immigrants, on free speech, on the economy, gutting Medicaid cuts right to the heart of who we think we are as Americans. What do we stand for? Caring for less fortunate people or giving tax cuts to the wealthiest people? What does it say about us? This is what's on the table. And at least as far as most people don't even care or even know what's going on. Our number is 877-301-8970. And by the way, the fear I have about this whole thing, Trump is quoted from the Republican caucus, he's on Capitol Hill as we speak, as saying, don't F with Medicaid.
That's right.
But we know that they are effing with Medicaid. What Trump's going to say after they do this is we didn't cut it at all. All we did was eliminate waste and fraud and eliminate murderous, undocumented people who should be in prisons in El Salvador. The truth is, if you read the details, we're not going to bore you with all of them. We'll give you some of them in a few minutes. This will mean millions and millions and millions of people who are dependent upon Medicaid for health care to lose it. And by the way, as John Gruber has mentioned, the head of the economy department at MIT, regularly with us, obviously he's an healthcare expert, this is not just that poor person who you used to have sympathy for down the street. It may be your grandmother or your mother who's in a nursing home who had to get rid of all of her income, essentially, or assets, I should say.
Couldn't afford,
so she qualified for...
And she couldn't afford, like most people can't, $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 a month for assisted living or care in a nursing home. So that's how you end up. Unless you're like a millionaire, you can't afford that kind of care.
And the other fiction about this is all we're going to do is add a work requirement. Do you know what I didn't know till this morning? I knew the percentage was high. Do you know what percentage of people on Medicaid already work or are exempt by law because they're disabled or have a kid in school? Guess what percent?
92%.
92% already are working.
Jim,
so this is total BS.
You know how we always used to say, if you hear a politician say it's for the children, it's the last refuge of scoundrels.
He used to write that all the time.
You know what the last refuge of scoundrels is now?
What's that?
waste, fraud, and corruption. It is the last refuge of scoundrels. They are full of baloney. First of all, this is what Elon Musk was saying. He's going to get rid of all the waste, fraud. Well, he didn't. He just chopped everything and left things in a ruin and a mess. But when you read these stories and you listen to people that really know what they're talking about, the waste in Medicaid is mostly from providers that are stealing, like transportation people, like ambulance drivers that claim that they drove 75 people when really they didn't drive any. But
it's still low, even amongst.
It's very, very low. Or you say waste. Well, waste could be maybe you had too many tests that you shouldn't have had. But this idea that there's all this waste and fraud and corruption, like I said, if somebody talks about waste, fraud, and corruption, they're either lying or they're ignorant, one or the other.
Well, speaking of ignorant, can I play a little sound from RFK Jr. during his confirmation hearing? And it was pretty good. This is just a taste that he had no idea what the difference between Medicare and Medicaid was, and incorrectly states Medicaid's funding source. Here he is.
I'm not exactly sure because I'm not in there. I mean, it is difficult to integrate them because Medicare is under fee-for-service. It's paid for by employer taxes. Medicaid is fully paid for by the federal government, and it's not fee-for-service.
It's not fully paid for by the federal government. In our state, for example, half of it is paid for by state government. And by the way, Medicare is not just paid for by employer taxes, it's paid for employee taxes. So, I mean, he clearly had no idea what arguably the two most important programs the federal government is involved in: health care for older people over 65 and health care for low-income people. 877-301-8970. It pays for appointments, it pays for the emergency room, pays for drugs, it pays for long-term care if you're income eligible.
You know what John Gruber also said, which was a great point. He, of course, runs the economics department at MIT, so he sort of knows something about the economy.
He sort of knows something
you might say, and he was also the architect, or one of them, of Obamacare. Is if they really wanted to save some money where there's a lot of cheating going on, what they would do is they would put enough lawyers at the IRS that they could go after the high-income tax cheaters, the millionaires and billionaires that are cheating on their taxes. That's where they could get a lot of money. They're not going to get it from so-called finding waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid. But the idea is that there's no constituency, as people have said up on the Beacon Hill for years, for poor people, right? So these are mostly poor people, or they're older people that are in nursing homes, or they're disabled people. So they figure they can get away with this because the people that are most affected by this won't know it came from Donald Trump. And plus, it's not going to go into effect, a lot of these cuts, till 2008 and 2009, but the tax cuts...
28, 29.
Yeah, 28, 29, that's right. So the tax cuts are going to continue right away if they continue, and those that are worried about the deficit, it's just going to keep exploding. So because of these tax cuts.
So that's the good news so far. 877-301-8970. Do you understand what's proposed, at least on Medicaid? Do you care about it? Does your family care about it? Does your family benefit from this? 877-301-8970. We should say one more thing, since we often trash Republicans for their cruelty, particularly directed at most vulnerable populations. The guy who may save Medicaid is a very conservative Republican in the Senate, Josh Hawley from Missouri, who is really to the right on almost everything, but spoke the truth about how many of his constituents in Missouri are hugely dependent upon federal funding for Medicaid. 877-301-8970. Where do you want to go?
Let us start with Sally in New Hampshire. By the way, we should say that most Americans don't want this to happen. 76 of Americans oppose these cuts, and so they're going to have to try to lie about this.
Well, they will. They'll say we didn't cut anything, except waste and abuse. By the way, I responded to this, but it's such an excellent text. I'm sorry, we'll get to you in a second, Sally. This is an anonymous texter. As usual from Jim, nothing but bashing conservatives. Tell all the deadbeats to get jobs instead of sucking off the system. Most employers offer insurance, you morons. Well, I think the moron, my friend, would be you, in light of the fact, as we said, 92% of people who get Medicaid are already working or have exemptions that Congress has passed because they're disabled or some such thing. But thanks for an excellent text. Sally in New Hampshire, you're first on Boston Public Radio. Hey there.
Hey, good morning.
And to you.
I'm first. I'm from Antrim, and this area, there are lots of low-income people, as I am, and so to get rid of Medicaid would be dreadful to so many people, because what Trump and RFK do not understand is that it's not just insurance, health insurance, but it trickles down to fuel assistance, electric. Some people need food pantry or food stamps. So, he's just deaf and blind to the needs of real people. And I don't feel that they're real people, since they are billionaires and they can't relate. And that's the problem. He cannot relate.
Sally, I think you indicated, I just want to be clear, are you on Medicaid?
Yes, I have, and I get fuel assistance as well.
How important has Medicaid been for you through the years?
It's been crucial ever since, I reached a certain age and I wasn't able to work anymore.
Yeah.
It was an enormous benefit. And it is to so many people in low-income areas where I live. In the Monadnock region, we have diversity of incomes, and it's been really important. It's just made my life so much easier. And yes, I'm still working, but it doesn't cover everything.
Sally, you were a perfect first call. We wish you luck, and we really thank you for sharing your story with us.
And
Thanks so much.
Sally mentioned food pantries. The USDA has slashed millions of dollars for food programs. And we just spent yesterday talking about, middle class people who can't afford to buy a house. That, forget it. If you're like someone that's in the Medicaid range, you can't afford anything, and the income inequality just keeps growing. It's kind of like trickle-down economics. That was another baloney line that people believed during Reagan, which turned out to be a big scam. There was never any trickle-down economics. And it's the same thing with this waste, fraud, and corruption thing. It's just, like I said, it's just you're lying or you don't know the true story. Anne in Cranston, thank you for calling.
Hi, Anne.
Hi, how are you today?
Fine, thanks.
Hi.
Good. The point I wanted to make, and I think maybe somebody has brought it up, we know that a lot of people who get Medicaid benefits work. And I think I haven't heard anything in the mainstream media or on talk radio that many people who work and are on Medicaid, they work, they may not work full time, they may be cobbling together jobs, and they work for employers who do not offer health care benefits, like Walmart, people who don't work sufficient hours. Small businesses don't have either enough employees to justify it. My son worked for a locksmith for 3 years and had to get his health insurance through the
Mass Health?
the health care marketplace.
Oh, she's in Cranston.
Oh, she's in Cranston,
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Ann. Keep going.
So, and so there are a number of employers who are off the hook because the federal government and don't get me wrong, it's necessary, but why aren't employers mandated to provide health care insurance? Well, that would solve some of the problems.
Well, the reason they're not is because the Affordable Care Act could only go so far, and you're right, and that's a wonderful point. And by the way, as we said, that 92% is the figure that is agreed upon of people who receive Medicaid who are working or have an exemption because of disability.
But by the way,
and you made a wonderful point. Thanks for making it.
It's also important to point out that as soon as you make enough money, you're not going to get Medicaid anymore. You're not going to qualify for it anymore. There are income eligibility matters. So a lot of people are just, they maybe have an opportunity for a raise or a new job, so they have to decide, are they going to go to the new job and risk no insurance or poor insurance, or are they going to not take that job to stay on Medicaid?
Ann also touched on something. A lot of huge operations. We've had this discussion in the past. Places like McDonald's, which I know they've raised the minimum wage, but when they pay a very low minimum and don't provide health insurance, we subsidize McDonald's essentially because we provide Medicaid to their employees. And so people should just know that. By the way, an anonymous texter, I guess because I called that person a moron, which of course I meant, says, Jimmy, don't be so sensitive. It's just a text. Now, that's a very good point, actually.
Okay.
It's a disturbing text, but it was just a text. 877-301-8970.
You know what cracks me up, too?
What's that?
These people are all so holy. They're all so holy. J.D. Vance
here comes
is
the
running
cross.
Well, it just drives me nuts. They're all running out. J.D., big convert to Catholicism. Often the converts are the worst ones. They're better off being a cradle Catholic. Yeah, because they go off the deep end, like he's off the deep end. He's over there meeting with the Pope.
Met with the new one, too.
That's right. Karen Levitt's got a cross on.
Didn't kill him.
These women on Fox will have their crosses on. I think that they forget. They're obsessed with, like, gay stuff and marriage stuff and sex stuff. The poor is probably the most constant word used in the New Testament that they're all supposedly representing with their crosses. I mean, they just...
who else does the Catholic Church care deeply about that they don't?
Migrants.
I mean...
Yeah.
By the way, even we talked about this a lot in the past. Even when Bernard Law was doing the horrible things he was doing around sex abuse, there was no more powerful testifier on Beacon Hill for low-income people's benefits and for migrants than Law. Of course, he was doing something pretty horrible on the side. If you want to hear a little Trump to get your spirits up, here he is after speaking to the House Republican Conference this morning, complimenting, when you see Mike Johnson standing next to him, does he not look like he's going to start
That's right.
like a little doggy?
And Mike Johnson, you know what he always says?
What?
His faith is everything to him.
It is?
His Christian faith is everything to him.
Here is Trump talking about Mike Johnson.
I'm his biggest fan. I love this guy.
Love him.
Think of it. You can't be a guy like me and have a one majority. You have to be a guy like him, a nice person. He's very religious. He prays. He's a man of God. And so am I, but
of course.
He's really to a new level, I will tell you. He is a great guy. They love him in Louisiana. They love him that's the only kind of guy.
Only kind of guy.
And we know what God says.
What?
Screw the poor so we can give all those tax cuts to the millionaires and the billionaires. And Trump can get his fancy plane from Qatar because it's not the one he has is not snazzy and luxurious enough.
By the way, we can't say this enough. I'm so glad you said that. The reason they've got to cut something, primarily Medicaid, by up to $880 billion is because they got to fund at least part of these tax cuts, primarily for the wealthy. And by the way, even after that, they will increase the deficit, which Republicans allegedly care really deeply about, by $3 to $4 trillion. And when he trashed Biden, which he does all the time, even trashed Biden after he sent him, they put out that nice tweet about hope you and Jill and everybody recover as quickly as possible. He was talking about Biden as the biggest spender and deficit builder of all time. You know who the biggest deficit builder of all time is? Trump won.
Yeah.
Trump won. $8 trillion as compared to under $5 trillion, which is not to be praised, under $5 trillion for 4 years of Biden.
He's going to do it again. It's so incredible that even now people believe a word he says, because how can you?
But there's a reason. Did you see the poll the other day? 42% approval, which is quite low. Where does half of that approval come from?
People who aren't paying attention.
Low information voters.
This was very interesting because he's lost some support on immigration stuff, but the people that are still supporting of him do not know about Abrego Garcia, the guy that he sent to the prison in El Salvador, mistakenly, he's in a better prison now, but I don't know how great the prisons are in El Salvador, but not in the worst one.
Yeah.
But anyway, he's still in prison in El Salvador. They don't know about that. They don't know about a lot of the people that are being dragged off the street, like Ramesa Ozark. So they have this vision that what he's doing is taking the bad hombres, as he used to say, the violent criminals, and that's not.
What do they do? What do they do every day that they don't know anything about?
They're working 4 jobs, Jim, so they can afford the rent.
Well, don't you catch the news or see a newspaper? Oh, well, there aren't many newspapers anymore.
No.
But newspapers on a stand when you go get a cup of coffee?
No, people get their news from social media.
They do.
And social media, as we know, is another big lie. And I mispronounced it's Ozturk. I said it wrong.
What'd you say?
I don't know what I said, but I said it wrong.
Well.
Heather from Sterling. Hi.
Hello, Heather from Sterling.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good.
Good. I was calling just to bring up a point of Medicaid that some people might not even think about. I work in special education, specifically with kids who all have autism. And part of my workday, at the end of the workday, is to file Medicaid for every single one of my students.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it's services that people may not even be thinking about in the bigger picture, but that would certainly affect the kids I work with as well as ton of other students, obviously.
You know that, by the way, one of the ways, I'm sure you know this better than we do, Heather, one of the ways they're going to pair people off Medicaid is they're going to double this certification frequency, meaning you got to do it twice a year rather than just once a year. And as I'm sure you can attest to far better than we, the bookkeeping and all the other filing requirements are pretty intense, particularly when you're busy dealing with having no money. But you're going to have to do what you do or help people do what they do twice a year rather than once, which is a pretty significant burden. Heather, thank you for your work and your call. We appreciate it.
And by the way, there was in the Globe story about what Medicare, we call it Mass Health here in Massachusetts, it talked about there was a lot of fraud from providers regarding autism services, not from the families with the family members who were dealing with autism. It was from the people that lied about the services they were doing. That's where most of the fraud is.
Anna in Rockport.
And by the way, they do go after it. They do go after it.
In Rockport, they do. You've got a minute before we've got to take a break. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, thank you. So I have an adult son who has Down syndrome, who's on Medicaid and Mass Health and lives in a group home and receives day services. And these cuts are really going to affect his life and other people in the disability community.
How worried are you, Anna?
I'm extremely worried. I'm very, very worried.
Yeah.
This will really affect disability services across the board.
You know, I really wish you could speak to one of the members of the Republican conference who supports these cuts and tell the story of your family and your son and let them respond to the fact that I guess your need is not worthy of federal support. Anna, we wish you luck. And thank you a lot for the call.
You know, they make it like everybody's sitting around eating bonbons and not working. And I'm sure there are some people that are doing that, but they are a teeny tiny bit of the whole population. Anyway, we're going to keep talking about this for a while longer. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on The Culture Show, reaching for the stars. Now that the Michelin Guide is coming to Boston, what does it mean for the chefs and staff who work at restaurants in contention for Michelin stars? Acclaimed chefs Mark Sheehan and Will Gilson serve up their insight and expertise. Plus, Tony-nominated playwright Jocelyn Bio on bringing Jaja's African hair braiding to Boston's Speakeasy stage. That and more on The Culture Show today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And The Huntington with The Light in the Piazza, a new production of Adam Guttle's Tony Award-winning score and Craig Lucas's profound book. May 8th through June 15th at the Huntington Theater, huntingtontheater.org. And Bridgewater State University, helping create jobs for Massachusetts. BSU's skilled graduates are recruited by today's industry leaders, elevating business in Boston and beyond. bridgew.edu/elevate.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Mark Regan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow, Doris Kearns Goodwin, one of our favorite guests, joins us at noon. She's got a new project with Kevin Costner. I'm dying to hear about that.
Me too.
Plus, the AG will be here tomorrow. Andrea Campbell will join us 1 to 2 to answer your questions. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about Donald Trump's big savage plan to cut Medicaid spending and other things to fund his tax cuts. Our number is 877-301-8970.
Listen to this text from Mary from Worcester. I'm 30 years old, college degree, raised in a middle-class family, but have ended up in a position where I'm a full-time waitress and utilizing Mass Health. I work 40-plus hours a week on my feet. The only reason I even got myself on Mass Health is because of my asthma and my need for prescriptions. Without those prescriptions, I would die, but without insurance, I wouldn't be able to afford my medications.
Thank you, Mary.
And that's a great point, Mary, because remember all the stories we did about the people rationing their diabetes medication and not taking other medications because they couldn't afford it. And once again, we are like the big suckers. We're big and tough, United States cowboys, and have our guns and all that. But what do other developed countries of the world all have? They have universal health insurance, and
child care.
And
they
so
take care
we're
of
just
families in their
like
country.
Kind of a bunch of big suckers, I think. Anyway, never mind. I was going to say that we already talked about the autistic.
877-301-8970. Where are we going next, Brighton? Please help us out here.
Here's another person who says they're worried about their neighbors with 3 adult autistic kids, live in the Habitat for Humanity home, and the benefits they get for the kids help pay the majority of their mortgage. Massachusetts Mass Health is really good in Massachusetts. We do a lot more than a lot of other people do, and that's important to remember that we're not going to be doing that if they do these cuts because Trump doesn't like Massachusetts. He doesn't like blue states. So if there's any way to give us more of a screwing than other states, he's going to find a way to do it.
Well, they can. I learned this morning that some of the cuts around Medicaid expansion will be greater for those states that cover the kids of undocumented people, which we do, which means there'll be deeper cuts. And in light of the fact that Beacon Hill has said no new taxes, that obviously means if they decide to fill the hole created with the lack of federal funding on Medicaid, then they're going to have to cut other things from what appears to be a pretty tight budget.
And by the way, all the New England states do. I think every one
of them.
They do? I think it's Connecticut, Rhode Island does.
Wait, took expansion? Or?
No, they cover kids.
Oh, they do?
Yes.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, Sandra in Carver, welcome to the show. Hi.
Hi, thank you for taking my call.
Thank you.
I just would like to say this, that Medicaid should not be cut for children or physically disabled or mentally disabled people. I have a son who had a bottle rocket accident, a bottle rocket blow up in his ear when he was 17, which caused brain damage. He is on medication, had been in Taunton State Hospital for several years, which the politicians have been trying to close, and he has been in group homes, and the Department of Mental Health has tried to wean these people into their own apartments, and he was in one for a short period of time, but he relapsed, and he has been in group homes since. He has to be maintained on medication to control, his behaviors from the damage, and absolutely should not be cut.
Well, it should not, based on what you say, Sandra, and all we can say is we hope it is not. And again, thank you for your call. As I said at the beginning, we don't know what the outcome is going to be. We know what the Republicans in Congress intend the outcome to be, but hopefully there'll be enough Republicans like Hawley, maybe like Collins, maybe like Murkowski, that can frustrate the worst of these proposed Medicaid cuts.
I just want to mention, to correct myself, the only state in New England that doesn't cover the children who are here from other countries is New Hampshire. Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Maine, Vermont, and Connecticut all do.
Julia in Boston, hi.
Yeah, hi there.
Hi there.
So good morning.
You too.
I just wanted to call because I myself am on Mass Health and Medicare, and actually Medicare can start much earlier than 65 if you have a disability, which in my case was true. My husband is also on Mass Health. He's working. He has employer insurance, but Mass Health, because we are low income, helps cover co-pays and deductibles. But the other thing is that Mass Health has allowed me to be able to take agency, take care of my health, stay in my home, and work as hard as possible to not cost the system more money because I'm able to get the care I need and I don't end up in the emergency room, and which is astronomically expensive. And I think the penny-wise, pound-foolish approach is going to come back to bite us in the butt, so to speak.
Yeah, that is
a great point.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Julie. That's a hugely important point. The emergency room is the alternative. But go ahead.
Yeah, and then one other thing is that when you mentioned that we might have to fill out the application form twice a year, right then and there, it almost cost the state more money by having a heart attack, because I can tell you it is such an onerous process, especially for the over 65. It's something like 32 pages, just the application, without having to provide documents. And so, yeah, that's another point.
Julia, we're really
Julia,
glad you
that's
called.
a great point, and that's part of the strategy too, to make it so hard to apply or so hard to prove that you're working that it's impossible. You keep failing the test, and they keep saying you're shut off because you didn't cross off the T on page 17 or something like that.
As Julia just said, she said her alternative is the emergency room. Do you know who doesn't pay for the emergency room? The federal government. So they get off the hook on Medicaid for Julia, for example. Let's hope they don't. And the state is on the hook, or well, actually it's a surcharge in part on people's private insurance, but they transfer the obligation because it's not going to go away. People are still going to go get treatment to the state or individual ratepayers.
And also, she's talking about being able to stay in their own home as opposed to somebody having to go into a nursing home.
Point.
And if you've been to a nursing home lately, I don't think what you want them to get any worse than they already are. Some of them are great, but a lot of them are not great at all. Anyway,
so we hope you'll all read up on this, by the way. We'll get back to it, but
Don't
it's a
forget,
really big deal.
Waste, fraud, and corruption, the last refuge of scoundrels, they are not telling you the truth. There is not nearly enough. Okay, coming up after a quick break, NBC Sports Boston, Trenni Casey is next. She's going to talk about the Celtics, Jason Tatum, what's next, plus the you-know-what hit the fan at a high school girls lacrosse match. You're going to hear about that from Trenni Casey. Up next, you're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
In Mexico City, street DJs are famous for hosting outdoor dance parties.
Salud para el barrio Bravo, la DJ, Rosa Pistola.
We speak to Sonny Darrows about the tradition's roots in working-class communities. That and the day's top global news next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And Bryant University, where tomorrow's leaders can discover that beautiful grit gets you in the know, the room, and in demand. Learn more at bryant.edu. And the Lyric Stage, presenting Hello, Dolly. Brimming with classic musical theater tunes, endearing characters, and good humor, Hello, Dolly is on stage May 16th through June 22nd at Lyric Stage Boston. Ticket information at lyricstage.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan, live from the library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Hell of a day on the show tomorrow. Doris Kearns Goodwin joins us at noon, as we say, not only to talk about the state of affairs in this country, but about her partnership with Kevin Costner on a new project. Plus, the AG, Andrea Campbell, will be here at 1 to 2 p.m. We're joined now at the library desk by Trenni Casey, anchor reporter for NBC Sports Boston, and she is here not to discuss that the New York Times is reporting that Jordan Hudson and Bill Belichick are engaged.
An anonymous texter just wanted to inform me of that. Thank you very much, texter.
But we're not talking about it.
We're not talking about that. No,
New York Times reports, but we're not talking about it.
Well, maybe Doris Kearns Goodwin will talk with you guys about it tomorrow.
Wow, think about it. You got $8 million in property now. The sky's the limit.
We're not talking about it,
She could really clean up as Mrs. Belichick.
Yeah.
Okay, so we won't
How'd
talk
you like to
about
go to that wedding, by the way? I would love to go to that wedding. Do you think
Trump
there's any chance?
Trump will be there.
He'll probably be
Don't
there.
you think?
Probably be presiding. But we're not talking about it.
He
so
justice the peace of the day.
It was in the New York Times. It was not the New York Post.
Right,
New York
it was
Times.
not the New York Post,
We're
not
talking
the
about it,
Athletic.
though.
Or the Daily Mail, which has been all over this like white on rice.
The paper of
Let's
record.
not talk about it, though.
The New York Times.
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, we'll tear ourselves away
Catherine
somehow.
Rossman wrote the story we're not going to talk about in the New York Times. If you want to check it out, ROSS M-A-N, but
Okay,
you
the
can
whole
talk about it.
If you
but
want
we're
to,
not
if you want to hear
talking
people
about
talk
it.
about it, I'm
No,
sure
we're
we'll
not
talk
talking
about
about it.
it
We're not
tonight
talking
on
about
our Bella Early
We're not
Edition with
talking
Trenni,
about it.
airing from
We're
6
not
to
talking
7
about it.
p.m. weekdays on NBC Sports Boston.
Wait, you're going to talk about it or not talk
sure
about it?
we'll
I would
talk about
devote
it
the whole
tonight.
So we don't need to talk about it. She's going to talk about it from 6 to 7.
I
so
just
we
have
won't.
one question. I mean,
Catherine
there's so
Gergen
many.
Not the whole time.
There's so many.
Segment.
But I'll limit myself to one. Is he ever going to be the coach at University of North Carolina? Or
I think
is this
so,
kind of-
because he'd have to buy himself out of the contract. So he would have to willingly leave, and I think he's probably going to be too stubborn, because if he leaves that job, he has nothing. Like, then why
What do you mean he
do
has
people...
nothing? He's engaged, allegedly, according to the New York Times.
Well, he has
to
nothing
Jordan Hudson.
professionally.
Oh.
Then. Like, he could go back to media, I guess.
She's
But that,
saying,
him being a coach is going to get him more attention than him being on like the Manning cast again, right? Like that was fine last year, but after a while, when you're a broadcaster, even if you're a famous coach or player, like we all paid attention to Tom Brady in every like game that he called this year, but this year we probably won't be as interested. Like, who cares? He's already done it for a year. So
I have a
think
UNC question too, actually, since Marjorie brought it up.
We're not talking about it.
I may have this has nothing to do with Jordan Hudson. This is about UNC football, and I probably just missed this. Is Tom Brady going to be the quarterback for UNC when Belichick's coaching? So as we know, Belichick has never had a winning season without Tom Brady as quarterback. So why do we assume that he'll be any better at college coaching than he has been in the pros?
I don't know. I don't think we know that. But people are clearly interested. I just saw something today that ticket prices are up. More people have bought season tickets. Yes. So they're already having a Belichick effect by him being the head coach. Listen, the one thing he is, I will say this, I mean, he's a teacher at heart, right? Like, he is a guy who gets in there in the trenches. He likes to coach guys. It's who he is. So I am really curious. I'm curious, though, does he go to a school in the ACC that has often been, middle of the road? I know Drake May went to UNC, but it's not a great football school, right? It's not Miami or Alabama or LSU or Clemson or Michigan or Ohio State. It's fine. And so I'm curious what kind of players he's gotten. Can he get the most out of his players at that level? Like, if they go, I don't even know how many games are in we'll call it 10-1. If he only has 1 loss, 2 losses, and they go to a decent bowl game,
not happening.
He's been successful. But if it doesn't work, like this is a gamble for him, because if the team is 1 game over 500 or a game under 500, then you're looking at him and you're saying the distractions and you've lost it, and he probably will not ever coach at any level again, except for maybe like Nantucket High.
Well, I would argue, I'm sorry to belabor this because I've said it 1,000 times. I would argue
We're
he
not
hasn't
talking about this?
lost it. No, it has nothing to do with her. I would argue he hasn't lost it all. He never had it. I mean, again, the numbers speak for themselves. Tom Brady is the quarterback. He's a big winner. Tom Brady's not the quarterback, and he's never won anything.
I don't entirely agree with that, though, because Tom Brady during the first 3 Super Bowls was not the Tom Brady of the final 3 Super Bowls.
That's correct.
So it was Bill did put a team around Tom Brady, and he was innovative. He was especially innovative on defense.
So why did he never win without Brady? Exactly my point.
He lost his fastball.
I think he lost his fastball.
But now he's married to this woman that's like an incredible
He's not
acrobat.
married. He's not married.
He's getting married to this
Well,
woman.
we don't know that.
Okay, we should.
The New York Times said she's getting married. The paper
No.
record. The wedding is soon.
No, the New York Times said one source.
They said
rock
one.
on her
Jordan
finger.
Hudson has told at least one person, according to the New York Times, that they are engaged.
Okay.
You know who he told? She told a customer at Toys of Eros, which is where I'm going to be on Saturday, by the way.
What?
Jim is going to Toys of Eros.
You know what Toys of Eros?
I know what it is. You're going?
Well, I may be in Provincetown this weekend, so I'm going to
You
stop by.
have got to report back.
Oh, I'm going to try to find her
getting
mother.
a full report. You know
I'm
what you're going to
totally
do?
trying to find her
You know
mother.
what you're going to do? When I was at the Boston Herald, my boss
what
sent
happened?
me off to a dirty bookstore. We used to have dirty
They don't
bookstores.
call them dirty. They
Yeah,
don't
that's
call them
what
dirty.
we called them then. And I was supposed to write down every single title in the dirty bookstore because then I could
This
come
is
back
true, by the way.
and read them to him. It was kind of skeevy.
That's so Catholic. It's not a dirty bookstore.
Well, that's what we called them then. It was I think it was in Situate. Oh, I don't remember where it was.
Yeah.
Anyway,
It's pretty fancy place
the point
for a
is,
dirty
Jim,
bookstore.
I want you to go down this weekend, do some investigative reporting. I want you to get 20 titles of the different things on it, maybe 30 titles.
Can I tell you?
It might not be
Let
a
me just say
book.
this.
I don't
You have
think
nothing to
people-
worry about. Let me trust me.
I'm going to be
on
honest,
this one.
Marjorie. I don't know when the last time you were in a shop like this. Not a lot of books in these places
No,
anymore
not
because
books.
now everybody
Devices
can just
mostly.
Devices.
Yes, devices. Because people can just use this. They can just use their phone if they need.
Okay,
we
fine.
want different. Hey, listen. I was at the fetish fair at the Holiday Inn.
Oh, the fetish fair.
She was.
So, yeah, I'm an expert on these things. Right
She
now.
was.
Some
For
in-depth
work.
reporting.
For work.
For work.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
for
for
work.
And her
for
dentist
work.
was dressed as a French maid. That is a
My dentist
totally
was
true
not,
story.
No, he was in a motorcycle outfit.
Whatever. He was.
And the producer that came with me, remember it was John.
John,
was
who's
now
now
a police
cop in
officer.
Winthrop, yeah. Oh, I don't know if I should
John
have
came,
said
he's
that.
about 25 years old. He is so appalled that I'm dragging him to this fetish fair. He's got this placard around his chest.
Oh, I remember.
Press,
He sang
that's
press.
about like 2 feet by 2 feet. So nobody would think he was there for any other reason. They took over the whole Holiday Inn. All the French maids and all the people
When you
in the
say
black
fetish
leather.
fair, all I can think of is like one of those medieval things that you go to.
Well, it kinda
you know,
was.
That too,
like,
yeah.
but,
Kinda was.
But just
Okay,
with, like
so
sex toys.
you may know the Celtics were eliminated in the second round. They lost to the
we are
Knicks.
talking about sports here. This is
Now,
not a fetish segment.
Let me
We're-
tell you, my
Furry convention. What is it?
my
Furry convention.
I
That's right.
admittedly I am not a professional. However, I would argue that part
You're not
of
a
the,
professional basketball player.
No,
You're just not a
correct.
professional.
But
Okay.
I'm a fan.
Professional
I'm
sex
a fan.
store visitor.
Yes.
I would argue that part of the problem, I don't just mean to keep going after coaches. I happen to like Joe Mazzulla, what I know of him. I would say he did a pretty horrible job in this series. I mean, and the horrible to me was it appears as a viewer, and I watched most of the series, there were no adjustments when it was clear certain things were just not working.
This was one of my biggest. This has been one of my biggest gripes. Listen, I don't know Joe personally, but I can only assess on what I see. Last year, his take as many threes and make as many threes as you can, it worked last year, right? Well, it works when you're making them. It does not work when you're not making your three-point shots or
Right.
when a whole bunch of guys on your team are injured and so they don't have, or exhausted and they don't have the pep in their legs. There were no adjustments being made, substitutions, like they kept rolling. Kristaps Porzingis could barely breathe. And they kept rolling him out there, hoping, fingers crossed, that would be the day that maybe he would play better, and it wasn't happening. And I think really, listen, he's going to keep his job. They just won a title a year ago. But I think if you gave Brad Stevens some truth serum, next year is probably a pretty big year for Joe Mazzulla. Like, can he keep this team competitive without Jason Tatum? Can he design an offense? Can he design a defense? Can he develop players that maybe can become instrumental in their next run at a title? Because let's be honest, guys, they're not going to compete for a championship next year. Jason Tatum.
He could be out the whole year, right? We don't know yet, but he
We
could
don't know
miss the
yet,
whole year.
but he could miss the whole year. And honestly, if they're like a
really sad.
5 seed,
It is
or if
sad.
they're between like a 4 and an 8 seed, why would you rush him back? Like, there's no reason to rush Jason Tatum back. They're not winning a title next year without him. So let him fully recover so that maybe
right.
he can come back as close to what he was before the injury.
You know what I forget from time to time how young these players are.
He's only 27.
Tatum's 27, and
Yeah.
I'm sure most of you have seen this, even if you're not a basketball fan. After he rips his Achilles or whatever the verb is, ruptured his Achilles, he's being wheeled off in a wheelchair, and he has his hands over his face,
heartbreaking.
crying, and
Awful.
and you realize
awful.
he's a young man. I mean, he's brilliant and just incredible athlete, and seems to be a really decent person too, which I know, whatever.
And that's the thing. Like, a lot of these injuries have happened before. Kevin Durant, Kobe Bryant, but they were all in their 30s. This tends to be, but think about it, guys.
Meaning he should recover better and faster,
the thought
hopefully.
process is that he should make a fuller recovery than those guys, just because your body's going to bounce back a little bit better when you're 27 versus, I think Kobe ruptured his Achilles when he was 34. He also was able to have surgery, guys, immediately at the hospital for special surgery. Like, the best doctor in the world for this surgery just happened. I mean, the way the stars aligned, if you can call it that, when you have such a catastrophic sports injury, that there was hospital room. The doctor that would be the best in the world to do the surgery was there and available. He was in New York already, so they didn't have to transfer him. They didn't even have, it's like almost like his body didn't have time to react to all of the swelling and everything that happens with the catastrophic injury. They were able to get in there right away and repair it. So I think everyone is hopeful also that helps the recovery process.
Can we stay with basketball for a second? I know I've asked you this exact same question, but since it's a new season of the WNBA, I'm going to ask you again. The morning after Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese played.
Yep.
And Clark's team won by like 40 points or
Yeah,
something.
they crushed them.
They crushed them. And Reese is good. Clark is insane. I mean, just insane. I watch as many clips as I could find on ESPN or elsewhere. I also look for Paige Becker's thing, the first year, the rookie out of
the
UConn.
number 1 overall pick.
But I don't go search for other WNBA things. Those are the 3 players that I know the best. So does that mean, this is my age-old question, this is really all about Clark, Reese, Beckers, or is there broad interest in the whole
But
league,
isn't that broad interest? You didn't just say, I only search for Caitlin Clark.
Well,
you just gave me 3 names that you search for.
True.
And think about it. The more we pay attention to the WNBA, the more that women's college basketball is at the center of our attention. Then every year you're going to have somebody, like if Juju Watkins would not have blown out her knee in the NCAA USC in the NCAA tournament last year, I think she'll only be a No, she'll be, I think, maybe a junior this year.
But she's playing.
She should be able to come back. At this point, ACLs are pretty easy. Lots of athletes blow out their ACL. She's probably the next one. And forgive me because I'm forgetting her name, but it's Allison Feaster's daughter. And she was one of the best players in the national championship for UConn. She was only a freshman last year. So she's going to be, even though I can't remember her name right now, it's escaping me.
It's okay.
But it's going to become a household name. I think... Right, like a blizzard only starts with a couple of snowflakes, right? It never starts in full force. So you're like, oh, I'm only looking up these 3 players. Could you have told me 5 years ago 3 players you were looking up in the WNBA?
Sarah Strong, is that her name?
Sarah Strong, that is her name.
One of our colleagues. No, it wasn't me. One of our colleagues came up
yes,
with
Sarah
this.
Strong. So these are all names I think that are going to become household names. And I think the most important thing is, and listen, I know we want to talk a little bit about what happened between Reese and Clark and of course the fallout from it, but I kind of don't mind. I love the rivalry between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. I don't love the fans taking it into a racial area.
What happened, by the way, is Clark fouled Reese.
Yes.
The issue was it a flagrant foul?
She was charged.
The
Clark was
officials
charged with a flagrant one.
Said it was flagrant, which means really over the top. And then what happened from the crowd?
So then the crowd. So Reese goes to the game was taking place at the Fieldhouse in Indianapolis. So it was a fever home crowd, and the home crowd booed Reese, which happens all the time when an opposing player that, has a big personality goes to the line. It happens in the NBA all the time. But they're now investigating multiple incidents of racial slurs being hurled at Angel Reese.
Okay.
And I think that is one of the unfortunate side effects of Caitlin Clark becoming the face, right? Because she is white.
She's white.
And I think a lot of people, Indiana isn't exactly the most diverse state on the planet. For those of you who have never been to Indiana before.
Have you been to Indiana?
Of course, from the Midwest. Marjorie, come on.
Well, Indianapolis is a pretty diverse
Indianapolis
city, right?
is a diverse city, but like many cities, it's segregated. Like I grew up in Milwaukee. Milwaukee is a very diverse city, and I would actually say it's less segregated than Boston. Like you can go a lot of places in Milwaukee and see a lot of different people mingling together at one. Now, part of it's there's not as many places to go in Milwaukee as there are in Boston. But like housing wise, it's just more segregated, right? And so when you have, I think, probably a majority white audience, that's. I just can't even believe that we are still living in a time when this is still happening and where people think it's okay. Like it just blows.
Well, hopefully people don't think it's okay. It's sort of analogous to Fenway crowds are generally white crowds. There's occasionally a racist remark there. Hopefully they'll be as condemned as roundly as the Red Sox and other people condemn racists
to me,
here.
if they find out who did this, you should never be able to attend. I'm not just talking WNBA.
Totally
you should not be allowed at an NBA game either. You should have all of your season ticket privileges, your ticket buying privileges revoked. If you cannot act like a decent human being when you go, listen, you can boo somebody if you don't like them.
Speaking of this,
just take it away.
Speaking of booing and misbehaving, you wanted to talk about the high school.
We did a thing the other day about parents in particular abusing referees and that sort of thing and getting totally out of control. There's a story in the Globe today.
This was wild to me.
About essentially people yelling at referees.
Well, coaches screaming at referees.
Explain what. I'm sorry, coach. Of course, it was a coach. Yeah. Explain. This is girls lacrosse.
Girls lacrosse. So apparently, there's been a women's. the positive of this article is that women's sports are exploding, right?
Yeah.
So they have so many young women playing lacrosse. It's a very popular game for young women that they don't even have enough. Since COVID, they haven't been able to hire enough officials. But one of the problems is that the officials they do hire, many of them leave because they get tired of being abused by coaches on the sideline, getting screamed at. One of the the key officials that the Globe interviewed said she feels like she's a cone in a drill, just being used and manipulated by coaches to motivate their teams, and like she's subhuman, that they don't even think about her, that she's an actual person.
Well, that's not just because the coach yelled at her. It's because when she confronted the coach the next time she was refereeing a game with that team involved, he said, "I knew you didn't make a mistake.
Yeah,
I'm
I
just
wanted
screaming
to
at you,
motivate.
rile up my team."
I wanted to rile up my team, and that's why she said she feels like a pawn in a game. Like she's not even a human being. Like, you're just screaming and swearing at me on the sidelines when I made the right call. But this, I think, I think there's a trickle down. I know you guys said you talked about parents being crazy. Yeah. You've got the parents who are yelling at the coaches, and then I think the coaches feel the pressure because they feel the pressure from the parents, and now they are yelling at the officials. Like, the officials are sort of this last line of defense. Listen, I obviously love sports. My niece and my nephew both play youth sports. They play a bunch of them. But I think there is such an emphasis on them and an emphasis on excelling and winning. And I think part of it is psychological. Like, parents are living vicariously through their kids. I think there's also a financial component to it of, if my kid doesn't play high-level sports, maybe they can at least go to a D3 school and get some kind of scholarship because they'll want them on their team. And so you can't afford college. So the only way, if your kid isn't a genius, to get an academic scholarship, then the only way to get your kid and pay for college is to have your college play some. My niece, we actually encourage her. We're like, yeah, you're like a pretty good soccer player, but you're a real good runner. I've even said it to her, like, maybe you should run cross country because cross country might be easier for you to get a college scholarship than playing soccer.
By the way,
we're guilty of it.
And there's such a nice group, the cross country team. I love the cross country team.
Do you know that some of these
referees,
referees,
boyfriend now that she met on cross country, so she may take it up.
So cute out there, jogging over the miles.
Some of these referees who are getting screamed at by coaches and parents are kids themselves.
Oh, yeah.
Because as a referee, I know, high school kids.
Pummeled.
I mean, it really is gross. And it's really,
but again,
foul.
it is.
And by the way, the coaches should be disqualified. I don't understand. I know it's their job, but maybe 2 strikes and you're out. What kind of role modeling are you doing for your kids who you're coaching, hopefully not just to be good athletes, but good human beings?
We wonder why high-level athletes scream at officials. Like, we see it all. We were just talking about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. How many times do you see NBA players, or Tom Brady was notorious for complaining and screaming and throwing temper tantrums when a call didn't go his way? Patrick Mahomes, notorious.
He's a whiner, too?
He's a whiner for going. Sidney Crosby, some of the greatest players, but it's like, well, when you get your way and you're not punished for how you act, and then these are people on the biggest stage, like, it's all just part of this culture. And I get it, you're hyper competitive. It feels like everything is on the line in that moment. But man, it's at least NFL officials and NBA officials get paid like a lot of money. I mean, these poor people who are on the side of a high school
and at least
game,
they have the
what do they get? A couple $100 if they're
the instant
lucky?
replay, so you can get things resolved one way or the other.
We only have a minute left. I have a quick question. I know that Rob
When's
Manfred.
The wedding?
No, Rob Manfred is the commissioner of baseball. He meets with Donald Trump, and Trump's cause for a long time has been to get Pete Rose unbanned. And did the Major League Baseball reinstate the late Pete Rose essentially because Trump told Manfred to do it?
I kind of feel like it, Jim. As soon as I saw that, I was like, are you kidding me? All these years. And
the guy bet on baseball, by the way, so he's banned for life by Paul Giamatti.
I mean, they did also, like, Shoeless Joe Jackson, basically anyone who is now deceased, but had a black mark on them. But it's like, so now we're just saying that you can
do anything as long as you're dead. You can do anything
as long as you're dead, and then you can be honored. I am curious to see. So Pete Rose will be eligible for the Hall of Fame. Not this year, but I think like next year or in 2 years.
Wasn't Shoeless
It'll be
Joe,
interesting to see.
There was more of a question around
it. He's
dead, but there was more of a gray
area. That was the Black Sox, like the Black Sox scandal of like the 1920s
I think
or something.
Pete Rose was a black and white thing. No.
By the way, it was Bart Giamatti who banned him, the commissioner. It's his son, Paul, who's the actor. I screwed up the two of them.
That's right. And he used to be the president of Yale, remember?
He was indeed.
That's when it was okay to be a college president.
Though, to this administration is unseemly.
When you find out when
Okay.
the wedding is, will you text
Yeah.
Marjorie? Okay,
We
fine.
got to go here. Trenni
Never
Casey,
keep you in the dark.
anchor
Thank
reporter
you.
for NBC News Boston,
Thank
PPR
you,
contributor.
Trenni.
Thank you very much, Trenni. Coming up after the noon news, we're going to talk about former President Joe Biden's cancer diagnosis with Boston Medical Center's Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett, and one woman's desperate search for health care. She was a reporter at the Globe. You're listening to BPR on GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. We are at the Boston Public Library.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. Stay with us here on GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And the Boston Symphony Orchestra, announcing the 2025 season of Tanglewood, showcasing the beauty of incredible surroundings and world-class music. Tanglewood, where music goes for the summer. Tanglewood.org. Frontline investigates how Hurricane Helene became an ominous warning about America's lack of preparedness around climate change-related storms. Watch Hurricane Helene's Deadly Warning tonight at 10 on GBH2.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, head of hour 2 BPR, live from the Boston Public Library. We're joined with Boston Medical Center's Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett with a reaction to a pretty advanced prostate cancer diagnosis for former President Biden. What do we know about Biden's case, and what should men know when it comes to their own health and safety around the disease?
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we're bringing you back-to-back summer previews. First up, Boston Globe film critic Odie Henderson, here to talk summer at the movies and the 50th anniversary of the ultimate summer blockbuster, Jaws. Then it's a quick update with Boston Pops conductor Keith Lockhart as the Pops announce their summer season lineup. No spoilers before he calls in. It's all next. Hour number 2, BPR 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump has emerged from his meeting with House Republicans after more than an hour today, saying his party is united behind his, quote, big, beautiful bill.
I think it was a really great, that was a meeting of love. Let me tell you, that was love in that room. There was no shouting. I think it was a meeting of love. There were a couple of things that we talked about specifically where some people felt a little bit one way or the other, not a big deal.
However, it is still unclear if Trump has persuaded Republican holdouts to support the massive bill of spending and tax cuts. The GOP cannot afford to lose more than 3 Republican votes in the House, where the GOP has a narrow majority. This week, 4 fiscal hardliners helped advance the bill out of committee without supporting it on grounds that the spending cuts don't go far enough. Democrats are united against the measure that they say undermines the most vulnerable Americans. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is defending the Trump administration's outreach to Russia to try to end the war in Ukraine. He's testifying before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, where he used to serve, and is facing tough questions from Democrats. Here's NPR's Michelle Kellerman.
The ranking Democrat on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Jeanne Shaheen, says the Trump administration is giving up its leverage with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
What Vladimir Putin is doing now is playing for time, and he's playing this president like a fiddle.
Rubio rejected that, saying Trump is trying to end a war that no one can win.
Russia wants what they do not currently have and are not entitled to, and Ukraine wants what they cannot regain militarily. And that's been the crux of the challenge.
He also argues that the U.S. hasn't given Putin any sanctions relief. Shaheen and other Democrats say Putin should face more pressure to stop Russia's aggression. Michelle Kellerman, NPR News, the State Department.
Over the weekend, tornadoes killed more than 24 people in Kentucky, Indiana, and Missouri. NPR's Rebecca Hirsch reports large outbreaks of tornadoes are getting more common.
The total number of tornadoes has been stable since scientists started tracking them in the 1950s. But big outbreaks where lots of storms move across a large area have gotten more common. Melissa Woodhelm helps lead the Midwestern Regional Climate Center at Purdue University.
In the past, we didn't see the kind of large outbreak days that we do now. It used to be kind of unusual to see, dozens of them in a day, and now we get that year after year.
It's unclear what role, if any, climate change might play in tornado trends. Scientists are actively working to understand how tornadoes are changing in order to better protect people in harm's way. Rebecca Hersher, NPR News.
U.S. stocks are trading lower this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down more than 100 points. You're listening to NPR News.
Good afternoon from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston. I'm Craig Lamolt. State senators are spending the week debating their $61 billion budget proposal for the new fiscal year that starts in July. They're hoping that policies built into the spending plan can make a dent in the Commonwealth's housing crunch. Roxbury State Senator Liz Miranda is championing an amendment to create a savings and education program for first-generation homebuyers.
First-gen homebuyers often don't have the financial support from parents to help with down payments or other upfront costs. And this is how we begin to actually tackle the generational and racial wealth gap.
Senators are also expected to support a measure that would have the state explore suspending the sales tax on construction materials used to build apartments. The Worcester Human Rights Commission continues to push municipal leaders to release police misconduct records. At a commission meeting last night, city staff said they're putting the records together, but they don't have a timeline for when they'll be released. In a response, Commissioner Randy Feldman asked that in the meantime, the city detail how many complaints have been made against some officers.
I would at least like to know, do some officers have a very large number of complaints far in excess of other officers so that we can learn for the public what's going on?
Last night's meeting was the first since Worcester's city manager decided not to appoint the Human Rights Commission's chair and vice chair to new terms on the board. The commission voted to make former city council candidate Guillermo Creamer Jr. its new chair. Sox take on the Mets in the second of a three-game series at Fenway tonight. In the forecast, cloudy and near 60 today, cloudy in the upper 40s overnight, and cloudy in the low 50s tomorrow. This is GBH.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive, with small business insurance for protecting a variety of business types with multiple coverage options, designed to fit business owners' needs. More about small business insurance is at progressivecommercial.com.
Here's Jim Browdy. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library. Thank you, and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin is going to join us. She's going to tell us about some new projects she's doing with the great actor Kevin Costner. She's going to be right here at the Boston Public Library. The Attorney General will be with us as well. Andrea Campbell from 1 to 2 taking our questions and yours. And the mayor on May 28th. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. We're joined now at the library by Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett. She is the Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center, Associate Professor at Boston University Medical School, and an Aspen Institute Health Innovators Fellow. Hello, Doctor. Nice to see you.
Hello. Wonderful to see you all.
So great to see you, too. So there is so much confusion about Joe Biden and his prostate cancer, which is metastasized diagnosis. So what should people know that are worried about winding up like he is?
Yeah. So just the headline, in case other people haven't heard it, on Friday, former President Joe Biden was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer, which means that it had come out of the prostate. In his case, it's in the bones, with a Gleason score of 9. So I'm going to just spend a moment explaining a bit more about what that means. So prostate cancer, first of all, just to give you a broad overview, it affects 1 in 8 men. It is the second most common cause of cancer for men, outside of non-melanoma skin cancer. We know that it is most frequently diagnosed in men as they get older, usually 65 to 74, and 78 is sort of the mean age of people getting sick from it. What does a Gleason score mean? And then I'm going to talk a little bit about screening, because I know there's a lot of shade being thrown in terms of couldn't he have known, and all of that. So the Gleason score is actually named after, a former physician who created this way of understanding how serious or how aggressive is the cancer. So in order to do it, they take samples from 2 different parts of the prostate where the cancer looks the worst, and then they grade it from a 1 to a 5. So if you get a 9, that means the 2 samples together obviously are a 5 and a 4, and that means that the cells looked very abnormal. So that is what's showing us that it's very aggressive. 10 is the highest you can go, okay? So he's very aggressive, and it's stage 4. So, what we do and what we know in terms of kind of the epidemiology, how do we screen for this? How do we think about it? How should your listeners be thinking about it? So early in medical school, I can tell you we did digital rectal exams on everybody. It was just a routine screening. We screened everybody annually. 2008.
Everyone's favorite.
Everyone's favorite. I was like literally thrown into it, my first day of med school. And then in 2008, they said, actually, what we know is that there's a lot of risks for being screened. There are benefits, but there are risks. And therefore, we should make sure that anyone's getting screened does a shared decision-making process with their physician. So that means that you have to sit down, you have to talk about what are your risks as an individual, right? So are you older? Do you have a first-degree relative with prostate cancer? Do you have a first-degree relative with BRCA1 or BRCA2?
What's that?
So that is the gene that women have who have breast cancer or ovarian cancer or pancreatic cancer. So a lot of physicians don't necessarily know that that's a risk factor, or people in public health, because the gene is still in the man, it just manifests in a different way. In prostate cancer, you're at higher risk. If you're at higher risk, and you know that there are risks of being tested, such as false positives. So in other words, if you get a screening test back and it shows that it's elevated, you have to then go down the line and get a biopsy. You have to do all kinds of things. And only 25% of people who are biopsied actually have prostate cancer. So you think about all those people who've gone through the anxiety, the pain, sometimes there's sexual consequences like impotence, difficulty with urination, etc. And only 25% of those people have prostate cancer. So it is not a straightforward screening test.
Which is why I believe the protocol is over a certain age, you don't recommend screening. Is that right?
Correct. So the shared decision making is really for people 55 to 69. After the age of 70, we don't recommend screening at all. And why is that?
Even if you're the president of the United States?
Even if you're the president of the United States, you should not overuse resources. This is screening. If you have symptoms, absolutely you should be getting, care from your doctor. You should be getting an exam. You should be getting a blood test.
Okay, can we stay there? I have a bunch of questions. I know you have more to say.
Please.
But symptoms.
Yeah.
If you have prostate cancer alone,
correct.
What are the symptoms? If you have prostate cancer that's metastasized, like his does, to bones, what are the symptoms?
Okay, so prostate cancer symptoms, first of all, are not present in everybody. So you can have prostate cancer with no symptoms. So that is really important to know, okay? Prostate cancer symptoms that you could have are difficulty with urination. You could have blood in your urine. You could, if you're a former President Joe Biden and you have it in your bones, you could have back pain, hip pain, okay, which are all very general symptoms. So probably, some of your listeners are thinking, well, I have all of those, right? In which case, obviously, you should see your primary care physician. But you can also have those symptoms with something called benign prostate hypertrophy, because your prostate is bigger and it's not cancerous and it's pushing up against your bladder or other things. So this is the confusion between these diagnoses.
Okay, a bunch more questions.
Great.
Here is a very classy President Trump taking questions from reporters at the White House on Monday and suggesting that Biden's cancer diagnosis, according to Trump, who's a noted physician, was covered up. Here's Trump.
Yes.
I think it's very sad, actually. I'm surprised that it wasn't the public wasn't notified a long time ago, because to get to stage 9, that's a long time.
It's not stage 9.
And it takes a long time to get to that situation. Now, I think, to get to a stage 9.
It's not stage 9.
I think that if you take a look, it's the same doctor that said that Joe was cognitively fine. There was nothing wrong with him.
Now, despite the incredible low-rent behavior by the President of the United States, when a guy who's a former president, his predecessor, finds out he's cancer, we don't know when Biden knew, but it's not unreasonable, because he may have known, and maybe there's but there's no evidence of that. But in light of the fact that what you say about testing once you reach a certain age, and he's well above that age, he's 80-something, it's very possible that he hadn't had testing at all and didn't know about it until recently. Is that?
That is absolutely correct. So there is the lack of testing after 70. Who knows if he had symptoms at all, right? So we heard that he got diagnosed once he had a symptom. And then the third piece is, if we know that he had such an aggressive cancer, why would he wait to start his treatment? There's no person who would say that he was waiting to tell the public until somehow this report about his cognitive function was about to come out as a kind of cover.
I have a last question. Is at the same time that you're saying above a certain age, the protocol is not to test. At the same time, I hear doctors like you saying, the earlier you catch it, the better, but we're not testing. Well, and the reason that matters is I saw a number, I just want to confirm that's true, that the cure rate for prostate cancer pre-metastasis is in the middle to high 90%.
98%.
That is unbelievable.
Yeah.
But there are some side effects to the cures of prostate cancer, which some people...
As she mentioned,
Yeah. So absolutely, the side effects are not minimal, including, sexual impotence and difficulty urinating. But on the other hand, because for the most part, prostate cancer is so slow growing, that's part of why we recommend stopping at the age of 70, because if you have it after the age of 70, the thought is that you will most likely die from other causes. Okay.
Right. And that's what people are saying is even though with the metastasis, the experts I've read, at least in the Times and the Post, say that the prognosis, again, they hadn't seen Biden, obviously, but generally that age, that stage of the disease can be 5 to 7 to 10 years. And every doctor I've seen quoted said it is more likely that he'll die from natural causes.
Absolutely.
Right.
And there will be, of course, side effects from the medication he will need to take. But that is correct. It is likely he will die from other causes.
Don't you think, can I say one last thing and I'll shut up, I promise? It seems to me, I understand privacy. My attitude is when you're the president of the United States or a former president, you gave it up, you decided to run. It seems to me that Biden could do a real service, not just on the political front, but on the health front, to disclose all the details. Here's when I found out. Here's why I didn't get tested. Oh, you do agree. Okay.
I completely agree. Okay. I actually think that part of public service and leadership is shedding light on really important questions that people have and being transparent. You don't have to share every single health factor you have, but not covering up health issues so that people can learn from it and so that we can continue to rebuild trust in our leadership and not feel like people are covering up medical facts.
Well, also, it's helpful for me
and it's helpful for the
as
public.
A man and
Absolutely.
a woman or a person who has a
It's a very important public health campaign that needs to be done around this. That's right.
By the way, one thing about getting older, and every cancer is different, obviously, but in general, I think cancers do grow less quickly when you're like 75 and 80 than they do when you're 20.
No, not necessarily.
No.
It really depends on the cancer.
Okay.
I wish I could say that's true.
Yeah.
Again, not every prostate cancer is the same, right?
Yeah.
So he just happens to have had a diagnosis of cancer cells that are reproducing very quickly and changing very quickly, hence the Gleason score of 9.
One last thing I want to say about this. We said it yesterday, but Marjorie and I were going back and forth in agreement on this today. It bears mentioning that the research that led to people whose prostate cancer is metastasized have a far better chance of living was done by the same NIH that Donald Trump is trying to virtually defund.
It was Biden's moonshot. And his work on cancer.
And they said in one of these stories that had this happened to Biden just only a few years ago, it would have been a totally different. So that is just showing how much we're going to lose now with these insane cuts on medical research at Mass General and the Brigham and all these places that they do this all around the country. We're talking about Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett. I wanted to highlight this next story by Jessica Bartlett because she is a Globe health reporter, and it underscores how difficult it is to get medical care. She talked about how she was having these terrible symptoms, constant bleeding, passing these blood clots the size of golf balls. She was losing consciousness, terrible pain. She would stand up and she'd be dizzy. And she called her OBGYN, and they said, well, come back in 3 weeks, which was a long time. She had previously tried to get a appointment with her primary care person. It wasn't clear if this was about this or just in general, that she couldn't get one with the primary care person for 9 months. When she called back the OBGYN a couple of days later, in extremis, the OBGYN told her to go to the emergency room, where she waited hours and hours and hours and hours. I mean, is this a rare, unusual case, or is this medicine today?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not rare. I mean, she wrote it beautifully and heartbreakingly. I would say, most practices, whoever, is running her practice of her primary care doctor, her OBGYN is probably quite chagrined to be reading that article. Most practices have urgent visits. We have same-day appointments where we get people in. But the documentation of, shunting people to the emergency room when we're saturated on the front lines, that is not unusual. And we've talked about this numerous times over the years in terms of what's happening in primary care, in terms of not, people leaving, and we don't pay enough in our state and in our country for primary care, and we're losing people, good people. The same is true for OBGYN. There's so much high stress and high turnover that's happening in OBGYN that clearly they're not bad people. They just didn't have capacity to see her, and or the person answering the phone may not have understood all the clinical implications. I think that it was really, going back to Biden and, what it means to be an advocate, using one's own personal story. She didn't have to do that.
It was a great story.
An amazing
Everyone
act
should
of
read
service, right? I felt like that, her using that, her, putting it all out there, we all learned from it.
Well, it turned out she had an IUD, and she was pregnant despite the IUD. So the fetus
she had
died.
A fetal demise.
And that's a whole other story. These IUDs without giving people anesthesia, that's another thing that's really terrible.
Okay, well, we could talk about that. There are nice ways of doing IUDs.
Oh, that's good.
You don't have to do anesthesia.
That's good. That's good. But I've just heard stories about, not personal stories, but stories about the pain of putting them in and taking them out. But in any case, it's a great story. Jessica Bartlett, Bartlett, at the Boston Globe. You can get it online. But my question to you is, so what's happening in the medical world? Because we've talked to you endlessly. There's not enough primary...
Which part of it?
Well, to deal with the pay, which is not what surgeons get, obviously, or OBGYNs don't get that kind of money either. How's the medical world dealing with this?
So there was a group of us just last week at the State House. There's legislation that's in front of the State House right now in Massachusetts, 2 bills in particular working on primary care. We're really grateful to Senator Friedman for her advocacy and sort of spearheading this work. But it's particularly looking at the workforce in terms of how we get a better and stronger pipeline, how we pay folks on the front line, how do we retain them, and also how do we actually pay for what matters to patients. right? How do we pay for things that keep people healthy, and how do we get payers on the same page and agree upon those metrics? So
one of the things I think either you or Michael Curry or somebody told us that they actually passed a few months ago was this thing that made it far easier for international students who were, I think, doctors at home to start practicing more quickly. That was the good news, but the bad news since is, I'm assuming if you're an international medical student or a doctor in another country, this is not number one on your list like it might have been 6 months ago for what's happening to people who are not born in the United States, right? Are you seeing that?
Yeah. I have seen that, and I think that it was an important quick fix to put out there, and I really appreciate and value our colleagues who trained in other countries, and yet for reasons you talked about politically, it's very mired. And on top of that, we have to be fixing our own pipeline as well.
Can I bring up something that I mention almost every day? And I want to make sure we'll get to that in a second. This can be brief because I assume I know what the answer is. When we talk about things that Trump is proposing to do that haven't actually happened yet, as opposed to a deportation or eliminating a particular department of the federal government, we often show great relief when a court stops or whatever. And my response always is we're not taking into account the fear that exists in the people who were the targets, even if they survived this round. And I'll ask what I assume is an obvious thing, is fear is a really unhealthy kind of thing to experience, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you're in fear, your fight or flight nervous system is constantly being energized, right? So all the stress hormones that we know lead to greater heart attacks and panic and depression and all, even chronic illnesses such as diabetes, which are connected to these stress hormones, they all go up. So this fear, it is deeply penetrated into our communities right now. And the question is, even when the quote-unquote threat has passed, how many generations will be affected by this fear? And all the epigenetic information that we know, all of the women who are pregnant right now, what kind of fear is going into their children? So there's, this is something that we're going to see the long shadow on this fear.
We're talking to Katherine Gergen Barnett.
So what about these changes that are proposed by RFK Jr. to the COVID vaccine, the Food and Drug Administration, and which is different than him. He's over at Health and Human Services, but they're both proposing changes as far as I understand.
Yeah, so hot off the press. In fact, as I was walking into your studio, I got handed the article, which President Trump and his team have announced that COVID vaccines for healthy adults and healthy young people will need to go through all kinds of extra scientific research and testing, which likely will make it very difficult for healthy people to get what we call boosters or the next round of COVID-19 vaccines. So that is, there's a lot more questions than answers. That is what I have right now. We do know that certainly, RFK's team is creating a lot of changes on the vaccine front. We know that there was a group, the CDC advisory panel, that met and recommended a whole bunch of things, including broader RSV vaccines and new meningitis shots, and none of those things have been implemented. And so I think we're going to see a lot of changes and recommendations in vaccines, and I also know the person who's up for Surgeon General has some opinions. Person. She's somebody who has said that she's very concerned about the cumulative effect of vaccines on children.
And RSV, is that
the respiratory syncytial virus that we talked about.
For babies?
It's for babies and for old people and for pregnant people.
Well, it's not just it's over 50, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I mean,
so over 65.
I thought it was 50.
The RSV is 50 and 65 for the
so it's
COVID-19
to get
vaccines.
them, you think?
So you'll stop being screened for prostate cancer, but you can get COVID-19 vaccines.
You can.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Just to put those things in categories.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever remember to get a vaccine you're supposed to get? Yes. I can't imagine it. You actually do?
I've gotten every COVID vaccine
You
except
have?
for one. Yeah.
Because you look at your partner in crime. He's always talking about it.
No, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
I am in line the night before when the next COVID shot comes out. I am there.
With your tent.
I am.
Yeah.
Well,
I
have
appreciate
noticed,
that about you.
Having had it twice, I was a lot sicker when I was 6 months from the vaccine than I was when I was a couple of weeks from the vaccine.
Even healthy people have benefit for 4 to 6 months in terms of getting acutely ill from COVID-19. So I just want us to remember the science behind that.
Do you think it's important that the head of HHS knows the difference between Medicare and Medicaid? It's not. Do you think so?
I don't know. I mean, it's just a throwaway.
Okay, it's just a word.
Yeah.
Okay. Where are you rushing to?
We're out of time.
Oh, we are? Okay, fine.
This has been a very robust, wonderful conversation.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you.
When Dr. Katherine Gergen Barnett, Vice Chair of Primary Care Innovation and Transformation at Boston Medical Center, Associate Professor at Boston University Medical School, and an Aspen Institute Health Innovator Fellow. Thank you very much, Doctor. After the little break here, we're going to talk to Boston Globe film columnist Odie Henderson. He's going to tell us all about the best summer movies to see. That's next on Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library.
From Say Brother to Basic Black. And now, GBH News Rooted is serving up Black intellect, culture, and joy. The name has evolved over the past 50-plus years, but the DNA of this show has stayed the same. We're rooted in conversations that speak to the Black experience across the diaspora. I'm Paris Alston, host of GBH News Rooted. Join the conversation Tuesday nights at 7:30 on GBH2 or watch on demand on the GBH News YouTube channel.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And MIT Federal Credit Union, providing personal loan options to help consolidate debt, fund home improvements, and more. Applications at mitfcu.org. Federally insured by NCUA. And the University of Massachusetts Amherst. United around a vision for public access to revolutionary education, UMass Amherst gives students the opportunity to seek solutions to the challenges of today. Learn more at umass.edu.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBHnews. Tomorrow at noon, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin joins us at the library, not just to talk about the state of the world, but also about her partnership on a new project with Kevin Costner. The AG, Andrea Campbell, will join us from 1 to 2. Oh, we forgot. Keith Lockhart is finally going to honor his commitment to us. He's going to call us before the 1 o'clock hour to tell us who the talent is for July 4th. We're joined now, though, speaking of talent, at the library desk by Odie Henderson. Odie is a film critic for the Boston Globe to talk about summer movies. Hello, Odie. How are you?
Hi.
Hello,
It's great
Odie.
to
So
see
great
you.
to see you again. So before we get to some of the movies that are coming out this summer, let's give a little shout out to the movie that's celebrating its 50th anniversary right now. That would be, of course, the blockbuster of all blockbusters.
Jaws.
Jaws, yeah.
When did you first see it? How old were you?
5.
And
I saw it opening weekend.
5 years old?
I saw it opening weekend.
With your mother?
No.
She wouldn't go?
No, my mother went, but I would usually go with a cousin or my aunts or somebody like that. So no, I went opening weekend.
Weren't you scared out of your mind at 5?
The first time, no. But then a couple of months later, my cousin took us to see it at midnight. And I was terrified. I don't know why. Maybe I was tired or whatever, but no, I mean, I grew up on horror movies, so.
So did it impact your willingness to swim in the ocean?
Well, I drowned a year later, so that gave me a fear
What
of
do you mean
water.
you drowned a year later?
I was at the YMCA at a field trip, and nobody was watching us, and one of the bullies kicked me in the water, and I was dead for 3 minutes.
Oh, my
You're kidding.
God.
No, so I'm terrified of the water. So the shark It had nothing to do with
so
that.
what they do, give you.
I had to be resuscitated. Yeah, topic at a time.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
Jaws didn't really. It scared me because of the unknown. You know, it's so well edited. And
Yeah.
I just saw it at TCM Festival. They did a really beautiful Technicolor print of it, and Lorraine Gary, who plays Roy Scheider's wife in the movie, she was there to talk about it. And the movie looked gorgeous. It looked better than it did in 1975. And I sat in the front row, and it was exciting. You know, Robert Shaw is great, and they had that play that was playing here recently, The Shark is Broken.
Oh, yes.
I saw it on Broadway. It was fantastic, you know, for us Jaws fans. But no, the movie scared me because of what you don't see. You know, I always said this, I think I said this before when I was on your show. If you show it to me, it doesn't bother me. If you don't show it to me, my brain is going to make it worse.
Well, that was Hitchcock's brilliance, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
By the way, we should say at 1:30 today,
we're going to talk about
We're going to
Jaws.
talk to our listeners
Yep.
about the impact Jaws has had on your life, how much you love the film, et cetera, et cetera.
But one quick story. I went to the beach, the shore, as we say in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And I had my radio, and I put the Jaws music on there, so help me God, people got out of the water. They threw me off the beach. That's another story.
Okay, so can we go, let's go start. We're going to go run through relatively quickly a bunch of summer openings, including the one you most anticipate with Denzel Washington, Highest to Lowest. Here's a clip from the trailer of Highest to Lowest, where a music mogul faces a life and death moral dilemma when he gets caught up in a ransom plot. Here it is.
There's more to life than just making money. It's integrity. It's what you stand for. It's what you actually believe in. You believe in yourself. You believe you'll be successful. And the hard times will come from the good times. The hard times will come from success. The hard times will come from the money, and the mayhem follows.
Most anticipated by you because of Washington?
Because it's a reuniting of Spike Lee and Denzel. And Denzel in general.
Yeah.
You know, and it played at Cannes yesterday. Last night it played, and Spike Lee was there in all his Knicks colors to troll the Celtics fans, I'm sure. No, it sounds really exciting. I love High and Low, which is the Kurosawa movie that this is a reimagining of. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Spike is going to do with it. So that was the reason why it was my most anticipated. The other movie that I would have anticipated, I already saw, which is The Life of Chuck.
Yeah.
Which I saw last year, so there really wasn't much. Oh, and Megan. How can I forget good old Megan 2.0, my favorite twerking killer robot.
Well, let's do Life of Chuck for a second, which obviously is off a Stephen King novella. Listen to this clip, and I'm not sure we're going to help you have any idea what the movie's about, but that's why we have Odie. Here it is.
When you look up at the night sky, it can tell you stuff about your future. It won't lie to you. It's pure that way. You might see a lot more than you wanted. But if you have heart, you have hope. And you have heart in you.
Well, that tells us absolutely nothing. So
Good.
what
It
is the
shouldn't
film
tell
about?
you anything.
What is the film about?
Well, I'm not going to tell you.
Okay, good.
Well,
It's
I'll
a
tell you
horror
something.
movie, though, is it?
It's not a horror movie.
It's not a horror movie.
No,
Oh,
no.
good.
It's not a horror movie at all. It's there's a supernatural element to it, but it's not a horror movie. It's probably one of the more gentle Stephen King adaptations. I saw the world premiere. I read The Life of Chuck, so I knew it was going to happen. And I was still like moved. I mean, I cried the whole movie. It would have been my #1 movie of last year if it had come out. So that's how much I enjoyed this movie.
Good.
It shocked me. It took me by complete surprise. Stephen King was there, and Mike Flanagan, who directed this and directed Dr. Sleep and a couple of other Stephen King adaptations, was also there. It's a wonderful movie. It's a beautiful little movie, but you have to pay attention to it to really kind of get what's happening in it.
You know, I'm so glad that Odie said it's not a horror movie, because we forget the brilliance of his writing and the movie from Shawshank to whatever.
Yeah.
Stand By Me is not a horror
Stand
movie.
By
That's
Me,
right.
of course,
Stand By Me
that's
is not a
right,
horror
of
movie.
course.
That's a very good point. But I do unfairly probably think of him of horror movies ever since I saw Carrie when I was like, whenever I was, when I saw the blood flying down.
Now, Odie,
I
we want
love
to make
that.
sure.
But we should see this one. This is a really good one.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Life of Chuck. That's
we want
good.
to make sure you're not going to think less of us when we tell you you that we play clips from the original Naked Gun probably every 3 days.
Airplane.
We do.
That's the one we play clips from.
Sadly, as we know, Leslie Nielsen is no longer with us. No. But Liam Neeson, an odd choice from my perspective, even though I think he's a great actor, here's a clip from the trailer of the new Naked Gun coming out this summer.
Little girl, stop. What do you want, little one?
Your ass.
Now, to explain that, there's a little girl who walks into the bank, and the little girl rips off her mask and grows about 3 feet, and under the mask and inside, well, whatever, is Liam Neeson. So tell us you liked the original Naked Gun.
I did.
Oh, you did?
I liked the original. I liked the first and the third one. I didn't like the second one.
I don't even know what the second one was.
That's the third one's the Oscar one, and the first one is obviously the original. And I watched Police Squad, and it was on television, which is the source material for Naked Gun. I'm of two minds about this. One, the Liam Neeson casting, I don't think would work at all.
Oh.
Now, but keep that in mind. Airplane, I try to explain this to younger folks. Airplane worked differently for me than it does for someone who didn't see it in 1980. Because in 1980, Leslie Nielsen was playing cops. He was playing rapists. He was playing all these serious roles. Peter Graves was on Mission Impossible. Robert Stack was the Untouchables. All these serious people going and making a fool of themselves. And so it was Spice and Barability speaking jive. I mean, this was... Spice is funny.
I speak jive.
Yeah.
She was a nun, if you don't remember.
He back, blood. Yeah. No, we're not going to get into my jive here, but it was a lot funnier because you didn't expect them to do something like that. So I'm assuming that's the impetus for them casting Liam Neeson. You know, he's the Taken guy. He's the guy that beats everybody up. But I don't think he has a sense of humor. Leslie Nielsen was known for having a sense of humor. And so I don't know if this is going to work or not. Plus, the humor seems to be a little meaner than the zazz humor in the first movie. Basically, he's pulling someone's heart out with a corkscrew.
Oh.
So in the trailer, this is happening, so I'm concerned.
Look at Marjorie.
No.
Marjorie's not into gore, Odie.
No, I'm not into
she's
gore.
An anti-gore
but I was
person.
into Naked Guns, and I was into Airplane big time.
I love Top Secret, which I wrote about when Val Kilmer passed.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite of the Zaz.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
And boy, I love reading about, he died, so that was obviously tragic, but what a career he'd had. I'd forgotten what a huge impact he had on so many movies.
Yeah, and his first two movies I think are still his best because he was loose, he was funny. You know, Real Genius is, in my opinion, a masterpiece. Real Genius and Top Secret.
Oh, okay.
Well, Top Secret first and then Real Genius. And then, I mean, that Top Secret kind of gave you everything. When he did The Doors later and he's singing, you're not surprised if you saw Top Secret because he's playing like an Elvis kind of spoof.
That's right.
And actually, he's more like Conrad Birdie, which I put in the paper, and I said that probably 8 people are going to get the reference to Conrad Birdie.
I saw Bye Bye Birdie with Dick Van Dyke on Broadway
and
about
Margaret.
90 years ago.
That was a great movie.
So, Odie, Mission Impossible, is this the 8th one? Is this
the 8th one.
Okay, here's Mission Impossible, The Final Reckoning, allegedly. Here, a group of intelligence operatives are discussing the seemingly impossible exploits of Ethan Hunt, who, as you know, is played by Tom Cruise.
This can't all be true.
Every word. He gassed a security briefing at the National Intelligence Directorate.
He arrived in the form of Mr. Kittredge's aide.
And left as Mr. Kittredge, I believe.
It's okay, fine. So are you looking forward to this?
Well, I reviewed it, so it was in the paper on Monday.
What'd you
paper
say?
on Friday. It's online now. I liked it, but it's not as good as the last one. And there's a lot of attempting to retrofit all 8 parts. If you've seen these movies, they have completely haphazard plots that don't really connect from movie to movie. This is part 2 to the last one, which is called Dead Reckoning Part 1. They changed the name of it. And so they have to give you this exposition, and it's a lot of montages from the old movies and a lot of exposition as to what happened in the last installment. That takes up almost the first hour of the movie before Tom Cruise goes, crazy and does all the insane stunts.
Which he does himself. That's really true.
He does them himself.
This hanging on the plane thing
he does. The submarine stuff, well, that's him. I mean, I love that they actually show you. I love when I see musicals, you see the whole body, you see the person dancing. You can see it's Tom Cruise. He makes sure that you see it's him.
Yeah.
Hanging on this plane, like his face is like... But this one takes itself too seriously. So,
you also say, I didn't realize it was your review that I'd read, and it is yours. You say in the middle of this, one of my favorite topics, which I'm sure we've discussed with you. You write, the already bloated, nearly 3-hour runtime starts to wear on your attention span. Is there a movie that needs to be longer than 2 hours? I think 1:30 should be the max. But
I've always said 90 minutes. I'm with you.
Okay, you agree with that?
It depends. I'm with you for the most part. Like I said, the substance, if it had been 80 minutes long, it'd be a masterpiece, but it's 140 minutes long.
Oh.
So you have, Lawrence of Arabia needs to be 4 hours long. The 10 Commandments, God bless it, needs to be 20 hours long. You don't need to have a Judd Apatow comedy like Funny People being 3 hours. You don't need this. Only Billy Wilder can do a comedy that's over 2 hours and make it work. 90 minutes, but everything's been 140 minutes. That's the new 90. Is 140, and you sit there. And I said that the thing I said after that was not to mention your bladder. So the attention span is going, and then you have to go to the bathroom. Yes,
you do.
3 hours long. There's no intermission. If they're going to make them this long, they should give you an intermission and have you get up and be able to talk. Like the Brutalist did that.
They gave an intermission, but that was too long, too.
I agree with you. The whole second half of the Brutalist could have been chucked, but the...
Yes.
At least the intermission is not just for you to go to the bathroom, it's also for you to have a conversation and to think about what you saw beforehand. That's why the movies in the old days would give you that intermission. Not just, they didn't care about your bladder, because back then you could walk in at any time in the movie.
Yeah, why don't they? Because you'd think you'd all go out and get some more popcorn.
More screening time. So this is Nicole Kidman's fault. It's AMC's fault, not Nicole Kidman's fault, because they can squeeze another screening in.
Oh, okay.
That's the reason why.
And so they don't care about you going to the concession stand and buying more popcorn.
But they'll give you 45 minutes of trailers and commercials at the beginning of the movie, and Nicole Kidman telling us about coming to this place of magic.
Do you think we should have those long previews at the beginning?
No. Here's the beautiful thing about being a film critic, probably the only nice thing about being a film critic, is that when I go see a movie, I don't get any of that.
Yeah, you don't get any of that. Okay.
Well, sometimes you get... the director comes on the screen and says, "Hi, I'm the director of this movie," and tries to explain it to you before the movie, which irritates me.
Me too.
Or like yesterday, you got Stitch driving his car through the theater. Because I saw Lilo and Stitch yesterday.
Oh.
And so, Stitch driving his car through the theater.
Wasn't that pretty good?
Actually, that was the best part of the movie.
Oh, no, you didn't like it?
So you're going to hear this for the first time, because I found my review before I got here. I wrote it on the train. I hated the original Lilo and Stitch. And I said this in the
You did.
I could not stand. I took my nephew to see it. He loved it. I wanted to pull a fire alarm. And this one is bad. But I liked it more than the cartoon. But it's still bad. First of all, it looks terrible.
It does?
Stitch looks terrible. He's not meant to be a CGI creation. He looks, it's a two-dimensional creation. Sometimes when you bring that into the third dimension, it looks bad. And it was watchable, which surprised me, because I hated the first one so much. But it's still not
watchable is a hell of an endorsement.
But no, if you're a millennial or someone, a lot of my friends who are younger say this movie is their childhood. So far be it from me to begrudge them to go and pay $30 to see it, because it's their childhood. But for me, like my nephew I think he'd love this version. He's 27 now.
Okay, so your most anticipated is highest to lowest. My most anticipated, I'd never even heard of until I read your piece. Then I watched the trailer.
Yes.
It's spectacular. It's called Sorry Baby, with this woman, Eva Victor. Let's play a little sound, and then you can tell us a little bit about it. Here's a clip from the trailer, as I said, of the A24 movie Sorry Baby, where the main character, Agnes, experiences a horrible event, but the world continues moving forward. Here it is.
Something pretty bad happened to me.
Did it just happen?
No. It was a little over 3 years ago.
Well, that's not that much time.
I know this is hard to talk about.
It doesn't feel that you know that. We know what you're going through. We are women. What?
I know you're scared, but you're okay.
What doesn't come through the clip, which is why I really like the movie, it's about a very serious topic, but it's also very funny.
Right.
And she mixes the two, I think, brilliantly.
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it, and I think it's excellent. And Roger Ebert used to say, it's not what a movie is about, it's how it's about it, which is a philosophy I employ all the time. And this movie is about a very serious topic. And Eva Victor is the star. She also wrote and directed it. And it's a fantastic piece of work, not just on her part, but on the actors that she's directing in the film, and the tone that it takes and how it gets there. It's a very moving picture. again, it's not, I don't want to say what it's about too much, but the way that she depicts this and the way that she handles it is just, it's a master class in good directing and good writing and good acting.
I'm going to steal something from somebody's review. I hope it wasn't yours that I'm stealing it from. My favorite television show, I think, of the last couple of years is Fleabag. And Phoebe Waller-Bridge is a total genius. I mean, a total genius. She looks a little bit like her. Her humor, at least to me, particularly the dark humor, is like her. Is this her first deal, or is this her first major thing? I've never heard of her before.
I think it's her directorial debut. I mean, she's been around. I don't want to speak at a school, but I think it is her debut.
Okay. Sorry Baby is the name of it. Eva Victor, star and director.
You want to mention your buddy, Chris Cooper.
Oh, we just want to say, well, our buddy, I mean, a friend of the show, obviously, and a local guy. Everything is going to be great, which has Allison Janney, Bryan Cranston, and local guy Chris Cooper, Academy Award winner Chris Cooper. We should say.
Have you seen that one yet?
I have not seen that one yet.
It's like
Jersey.
A family.
You're a Jersey
boy. It takes
boy.
place in Jersey, yeah.
A family drama, it seems like.
I think I'm seeing that next week, I think it is.
Great.
Screening.
So you wrote about how you became a film critic.
Yes, this is
I love
piece.
stories
I
about
love
you and
this
your
piece.
mother, by the way, who we've talked about in the past. Tell us about how you became a film critic.
Well, I mean, when I was a kid, like Martin Scorsese, I joke about this. We have two things in common. Besides being from the New York City area, we're both asthmatic kids, which meant we were in the house a lot because you couldn't breathe, and we would watch what was on. And for Martin and for me, it was $1 Million Movie, which was on when Martin Scorsese was a kid and was still on when I was a kid. And they funneled all the RKO movies through $1 Million Movie because RKO owned the station back then. And until it went off the air, it was the case. So I watched, and back then, you watched what was on. You know this. You had no choice. You had 3 channels and a couple of independent channels. What was on. And either you watched it or you didn't. So that gave you an education in film that, kids nowadays don't get because they get to choose what they want to watch. And so my mom would watch some of these movies with me at home and explain to me who these people were, who's Joan Crawford is, who Barbara Stanwyck is. Now, I wanted to write. Since I was 6 years old, I wanted to write for the newspaper. I wanted to be Jimmy Breslin. Oh. This kind of man of the street going out and doing that thing. And then Siskel and Ebert came on television, and I wanted to be a film critic after that because I love movies, I love writing, and this is a merging of the two things. And it was fascinating to watch them. So I wanted to do that, and my mother was completely against it, and she still is. Hi, Mom.
But this sounds like it was a great bonding thing for you and your mother. It sounds like you and your mother went to a lot of movies together.
We didn't go to a lot of movies together in the theater because my mom had so many kids. No, there's 5 of us. But I would go with my pops. I would go with my cousins. When I got old enough to go with some of the older cousins, we would go by ourselves, get dropped off and picked up. But my mom, we watch it on TV a lot more.
Okay, on TV.
On TV, the CBS Sunday night movie or something like that we would watch. And last year I wrote a piece about my mother and movies I watched with my mother that some of which I wish I hadn't, like Purple Rain. Or Shampoo, which is their fault. They took me to see Shampoo.
With your mother?
And I was at the drive-in and my parents kept doing this, putting their hands in front of my face.
That was Warren Beatty. That was a wild movie.
My mom was in love with Warren Beatty. She was much in love with him. And
he was very handsome.
He's not dead, by the way.
He's
just
not
so you
dead.
know.
He's
not
not
making
dead.
movies, but he's not dead.
He's not dead, and I understand my mom was in love with him, but he's one of those actors that I see him and he makes me itch.
He does?
And why would that be?
I don't know. I've liked 2 of his movies in his entire career. 3.
Yeah.
Bonnie and Clyde?
Bonnie and Clyde is one of them.
Okay, what's the other?
McCabe and Mrs. Miller is another.
That was a really good
How
one,
about
too.
Splendor in the Grass?
My mom loves that movie. He's
my
really
God,
hot in that movie.
Oh, very, very, yeah. So is she. They're like high school sweethearts. Hubba, hubba, hubba. In the days when you weren't supposed to be doing anything beyond holding hands.
Of course, beyond holding hands and other. No, I'm sorry. No, so I wrote about movies. I wrote. That's what you did. I wrote, and I had a little website, and I eventually got a blog, and then Matt Seitz invited me to write for his site, and that's how I got on the radar of film critics, and that's how I got on Roger Ebert's radar. And then Roger hired me to write at rogerebert.com, which I did for 11 years. That got me this gig here at the Globe.
So it's your birthday this week, is that correct?
It was Mother's Day.
What are you doing? What did you do for your birthday?
I went to see Death Becomes Her.
I knew you'd go see a movie. That's
It's a musical.
Oh, it's a musical. Oh,
Death
sorry.
Becomes Her was a movie.
What is the musical? Was it here?
No, it's on Broadway.
Oh.
No, Death Becomes Her was the movie with Meryl Streep and Goldie Hawn. They made a musical out of it. It's up for like 10 Tonys.
How was it?
It's fantastic. It's a lot of fun, and the special effects are a lot of fun. And there's a song called For the Gays, Gaze. So we know what they really mean.
Okay, Odie, great
Happy
to talk
birthday,
to you
Odie.
as
It's
always.
great. It really
Thanks for
is.
your great critiques, and thanks for the piece about becoming a film critic. It was a great piece.
Read him in the Globe.
Odie Henderson is a film critic for the Boston Globe. You should check him out. Odie Henderson. Coming up after a quick break, instead of two more things, it's two more headline announcements with Boston Pops conductor Keith Lockhart. He's going to reveal the star-studded lineup for the July 4th concert on the Esplanade. Keith Lockhart is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Dawn Staley has won 3 national championships as a basketball coach and 3 Olympic gold medals as a basketball player. In her memoir, Uncommon Favor, she says she's trying to pay it forward.
It's giving me a life that, for most, you read about a life that I have. And it's a debt that I'm trying to repay.
Coach Dawn Staley on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism, commemorating 250 years of history, independence, and innovation since the American Revolution. Learn more at massachusetts250.org.
Welcome back to BPR. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live at the library, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Tomorrow at noon, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin joins us at the library. And at 1 o'clock for an hour, Andrea Campbell, the Attorney General, joins us for an hour to take your questions and calls. Now, if you're a loyal listener of the show, you probably know we have long, I don't know what the right word is, I think we can say it, long bullied Boston Pops conductor and soon-to-be fill-in host on Boston Public Radio, Keith Lockhart, for never revealing to us in advance the July 4th spectacle program. Luckily, he has decided, we are told, to share the news with us directly on the big announcement day, probably so I don't continue to complain about it. Joining us on the phone from, I believe, somewhere on the West Coast is that conductor, Keith Lockhart. Welcome, Keith.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Jim and Marjorie. Long-time listener, first-time caller.
Yeah, thank you so much for calling. So Jim is so happy about
I'm
this.
very
He's
happy
very
about
proud of himself. He has
I am.
harassed you endlessly. So you're going to tell us all about July 4th, Keith Lockhart, I believe?
Well, you know, I'm grateful about this, too, because it means maybe Jim will get off my back about
That's right.
about that information.
Maybe.
That's right.
But
Maybe.
I'm happy to give you guys the scoop on
Good.
this.
Let's hear
And
it.
it's coming out today, but I can tell you, and everybody can tell they heard it first. Drum roll, please.
Da-la-la, da-la-la.
That was the most pathetic drum roll I've
close
ever
enough.
heard in my
Okay,
life.
you try it. You do the drum roll, Jim.
No, you did it excellently. That was a drum roll as best we can do on this show, Keith.
Well, we'll take it.
Thank you.
Okay.
On this year's 4th of July show, the Boston Pops will be joined by our special guests, Leanne Rimes.
I love Leanne Rimes.
great.
Country music superstar, 2-time Grammy Award winner, 2-time Country Music Association winner, amazing artist. We've worked with her before 20 years ago.
She was 13 when she did her first album, wasn't she?
Yes, she was. I think she was with us when she was 17 or
That's
something
incredible.
around that.
She's fabulous.
She's matured
Wow.
into just an incredible artist. And Leslie Odom Jr.
Who we love. Hamilton and more.
Oh my God! Wasn't he with you before Leslie Odom with the Pops in Boston? Haven't I seen him?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think last time was 2019. And he has been with us once on the 4th of July, too. So we've got 2 people who are coming back to help celebrate my 30th, which I really appreciate. And wait, there's more.
Okay, we're ready.
Boston's own Belle Biv DeVoe.
Oh, tell people.
New Edition guys, right?
Yes, exactly. The New Edition guys who split into their own successful rap ensemble. They've been on the scene since 1988. They're great. Everybody loves them. They won a Lifetime Soul Train Achievement Award, and they appeared with us at the Pops at the Winter Classic, the NHL Winter Classic in Fenway Park a couple of years ago.
So how happy are you? This is great. This is really great. How happy are you?
I'm thrilled. Sometimes, these things just line up right, and we're pinching ourselves because it's never easy. And we were just a week or so ago, we were going, oh, this isn't working. And then all of a sudden it worked. As well, by the way, the Soldiers Chorus from the United States Army Field Band and our own Boston Children's Chorus, Hubie Jones.
Oh,
that is fabulous.
Oh, they're terrific. We've had them on. They are fantastic.
Got a piece of them. We have.
That's great. So what do you think? How early should people get there if they want to get close to you? What
Today.
Should they start in June, or can they start the night before?
Stick out a place now. I don't think they're actually allowed anymore to get onto the Esplanade until the early morning hours of the 4th. We used to have people camping out, but I would make my plans to get down there early and get great seats. It's going to be a wonderful show, and I can't wait to share it with all of you.
Don't go away. We finally found a drum roll. Here it is. Now, is it as effective when you do the drum roll after the announcement? It's not, right?
No, but, we'll give it to you.
Do what you can. Hey, before you go, we only have 30 seconds left. Is that true? You didn't know a week ago who the lineup was? I mean, is that not anxiety-provoking?
Yes, I'm sure.
It is. Every year, it's always a thing in motion until it's not, and finally everything locks together. And we're looking for a balance. We're looking for different types of artists to appeal to different audiences, and somehow everything came together. Came together
beautifully. It's a great trio. Well, not just the trio. It's a great lineup. Keith, thanks for the call. I'm not going to harass you again until next year. Thanks so much.
And congratulations,
Safe trip to talk
Keith.
To you guys.
Yeah, great to talk to you too. It's going to be a great.
From San Francisco.
Thank you very much for taking the time. Okay.
I'm excited about this.
Leanne Rhymes, Leslie Odom Jr. Yeah,
he was Aaron Burr.
For those who it's going to be great.
It's great.
Anyway, okay, that's it. Boston Pops conductor Keith Lockhart. More info at bostonpops.org. Up next, after the 1 o'clock news, it is CNN's John King. We're going to talk to him about what's happening with Medicaid, Ukraine, Biden's diagnosis. You're listening to Boston Public Radio at the Boston Public Library.
Support GBH? Unlock all NPR Plus podcasts, like the Sunday Puzzle podcast, and enjoy exclusive perks like early access and bonus episodes from some of your favorite shows. Learn more at gbh.org/NPR Plus.
Support for GBH comes from you and the law firm of Davis Malm. Knowing the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com. Davis Malm. Lean, agile, strategic. And M&M Skylights. Servicing Massachusetts and New Hampshire, their team is part of the Velux Skylight Specialist Network and is committed to helping improve the air quality in your home or business. Consultations and more information at mmskylights.com.
You're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. GBH News. What matters to you?
I'm Jim Browdy, ahead on Hour 3 of BPR Live from the Boston Public Library. GOP leaders have a new spending bill, which, despite big cuts to Medicaid, would add approximately $3.3 trillion to the national debt. Thank you, tax cuts for the wealthy. We'll get reaction from CNN's John King to that, President Trump's call with Putin and what it means to Ukraine, and the protest, the resignation of the head of CBS News.
I'm Marjorie Egan. Then we'll end the show with you, talking about the 50th anniversary of the biggest summer blockbuster of all time, Jaws. Call or text your memories of summers spent on that fictional Martha's Vineyard island known as Amity Island. Has any film managed to top Jaws in your mind when it comes to summer at the movies? Will you swim on Cape Cod this summer? And, most crucially, how long after your first screening could you bring yourself to go close to the water again? Jaws and you next. Hour number 3, BPR on 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. President Trump is attempting to use his power of persuasion to get House Republicans to push through a bill that contains the bulk of his legislative agenda, the priorities including boosts for border security and tax cuts.
It's the biggest tax cut in American history, and if it doesn't pass, everybody's going to get a 68% tax increase.
Critics refute the 68% claim, though. Meanwhile, the GOP's been split among three main groups. Hardline fiscal hawks are demanding deficit reduction. Moderates want to protect access to Medicaid. Blue state Republicans want to raise the cap on the deduction for state and local taxes. Democrats are united against the bill. The Department of Homeland Security has conducted its first voluntary removal charter flight from Texas to Honduras and Colombia. NPR's Jimena Bustillo reports these self-deportation flights are a part of the administration's push to get migrants who are in the U.S. illegally to leave.
DHS said 64 people who opted to, quote, self-deport back to their home countries were on the flight. The department called it a voluntary charter flight. They say that's different from a flight Immigration and Customs Enforcement would use for deportations. Each person also received a $1,000 stipend and, quote, preserved the possibility that they could one day return to the U.S. The administration has launched a multi-million-dollar ad campaign encouraging immigrants without legal status to leave or face arrest and detention. But immigration advocates say questions remain over how many people may trust this program. And lawyers for immigrants argue that it could discourage people who may have legitimate asylum claims from pursuing legal options to stave off deportation. Jimena Bustillo, NPR News, Washington.
The Food and Drug Administration has announced plans that could limit access to COVID-19 vaccines. NPR's Rob Stein has details.
The FDA says that it plans to impose new requirements on COVID vaccines to focus on immunizing people at highest risk for serious complications from COVID. That would include people who are age 65 and older and younger people with other health problems. For children and younger healthy adults, the FDA wants vaccine companies to conduct additional research to demonstrate the safety and effectiveness of the vaccines. The FDA says the moves are necessary to restore trust in the vaccines. Critics say the moves are unnecessary because the vaccines are very safe and effective, and they would limit the ability of younger, healthy people to get vaccinated. Rob Stein, NPR News.
U.S. stocks are trading lower this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 88 points at 42,703. The S&P's down 14 points. The Nasdaq is off 37. From Washington, this is NPR News.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH newsroom in Boston, I'm Craig Lamalt. State senators are looking to take a stand on access to reproductive health care as the chamber debates its $61 billion budget proposal for next year. Needham State Senator Becca Rausch is pushing an amendment that would help Massachusetts brace for possible federal funding cuts to facilities that provide abortions. Rausch says her amendment would establish a state task force that would recommend ways to keep abortion care available if federal money is lost.
Because here in Massachusetts, abortion is safe and legal. And no matter what comes out of Washington, abortion here in Massachusetts must remain accessible.
Rausch is also proposing a free and confidential legal helpline on abortion for patients and healthcare providers. Critically endangered North Atlantic right whales gave birth to fewer babies this birthing season, according to the New England Aquarium. The whales give birth to calves off the southeastern U.S. from mid-November to mid-April. There are only about 370 of the species left. Federal authorities say they need to have at least 50 calves per season to start recovering. But this calving season only produced 11 mother-calf pairs, according to scientists with the New England Aquarium. They say the lack of baby whales underscores the need for the species' protection. The whales are vulnerable to entanglement in marine fishing gear and collisions with large ships. The Sox take on the Mets in the second of a three-game series at Fenway tonight, and in the forecast, cloudy and near 60 today, cloudy in the upper 40s tonight. More clouds tomorrow will be in the 50s, and then rain for Thursday and Friday, low to mid-50s each day. This is GBH.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher's dedicated team of specialists provide resources on investing, retirement income, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Hey, Eastern Friday. I am Marjorie Egan. Welcome to hour number 3 of Boston Public Radio. We are broadcasting live. Thank you from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Doris Kearns Goodwin, the great historian, is going to be with us tomorrow telling us about this project she's doing with the actor Kevin Costner. The Attorney General Andrea Campbell is going to join us from 1 to 2, and on May 28th, we will be joined by the Mayor of Boston, Michelle Wu. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Margie. We're now joined on Zoom by CNN's chief national correspondent, John King, the man behind the terrific reporting project this season all over the map. John, good to see you.
Happy Tuesday from great Washington, D.C. Sometimes great.
Well, I don't know what's going on there today. President Trump is talking about his big, beautiful bill that he wants to pass, and he says, you got to keep your hands off Medicaid, but that's not true. They are going to have their hands on Medicaid. So where are we with this big, beautiful bill? Do you think it's going to get passed or soon, or what?
Well, we'll know more later today as they try to work some things out. But even after the president went up there, he described it as a pep rally. He said it was time to get in line. He told them don't, used an expletive with Medicaid. You're absolutely right, Marjorie. Look, when we see the actual bill that they pass, and then if they pass it as it's implemented, we'll see if they can manage to find waste, fraud, and abuse and savings and not cut benefits. The bill does include some first-time work requirements that some people think are a good idea, some people think are a horrendous idea. I think, again, the challenge there is what are the actual rules and what are the provisions for people who have difficulty working, about community service or some other way of doing it if you pass it. But that's still a big if, even after the president went up there. You have a number of Republicans. I just read some quotes from one of the New York more moderate Republicans in a tough district to win next year to keep his seat. Saying it's still not good enough. We still need to do more. So the policy provisions here are fascinating and politically risky for Republicans. But I'm also fascinated by the question of the president's strength. There's no question. He still has an enormously tight grip on the Republican Party. But he's a second-term president. His approval rating is in the 40s. And the midterms are coming up next year. And so if you're in a district that either Trump barely won or that Harris won, and you're a Republican, it's time to make some very tough choices about loyalty to your president and your viability back home. Now, the Trump people are making clear, don't vote with him or don't vote with the speaker on this bill, and watch out for a primary challenge. But I think as we get through this week and into next week, and remember, this is just the House. The Senate still has to weigh in here. We're early in the process. We're not only seeing a number of very politically risky and controversial policy positions in these bills, but some really ripe politics, including the question of will more and more Republicans stand up to Trump, because his numbers are not great.
And by the way, in the Senate, as we mentioned when we discussed the Medicaid cuts with our listeners, Josh Hawley, who's not exactly a left-wing Republican, is among those who has been very outspoken, saying the Medicaid cuts are too deep. Too many of my constituents in Missouri will suffer. So there may be, with the Collinses, the Murkowskis, now Hawley, maybe others, it could be a rough road in the Senate, even if he gets it through the House, John.
Absolutely. And so I think you have a big question there, Jim. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but there's some basic.
Who's the sharper tool before we move on? Who would that be? Okay, next, John, go ahead.
Just walk down Dorchester Avenue.
I don't think so, but go ahead.
But, look, the president wants to make his 2017 tax cuts permanent. The Republicans want to do some other things, including increase funding for the Pentagon. They have some other tax provisions in there that cost money. They just do. No matter how even if you try to shade the books, or you can make some things temporary and make the math a little better. But Senator Hawley, not taking sides here, but we talked about this last week, more of a populist. So what happens? First, they have to get through the House, and let's see if they get something through the House. Let's assume they get something through the House, and let's see what it is. But you make a key point that then do these senators say, wait a minute, that Medicaid bite is too much, therefore we have to shrink the tax cuts, or we have to make more of the tax cuts temporary so that we can do math that says, well, we start making this money up 10 years out. And so we're nowhere near done with some normal budgetary, I'll call them tricks or tools. There's tools and there's tricks, and then there's kind of the shell game, right? So there are tools to save money that make sense, that we all do in our family budgets. You borrow a little bit now, there's money coming in later. Then there are tricks. That's that's only for 2 or 3 years, or we don't implement. We pass this big new program, but it doesn't actually start for 5 years.
Right.
So we pass the ball down the can. And a whole bunch of other things. So we don't know exactly what mix of tools, tricks, and shell games they're going to include, because they're still very early in the process, which is why, the president went up to Capitol Hill. That's something, right? When the commander-in-chief goes up to Capitol Hill, meets with his own party, and says, it's time. Stop bickering, pass it. And then within an hour of that meeting, some people are saying, no, sorry, appreciated the pep talk, but I still want more. That tells you something that he has a tight grip, but it's not a exact grip. There are still some people saying, no, I don't have to answer to him.
We talked about this with listeners at the beginning of the show. When you look at polls, like something like 70% of people do not want cut to Medicaid, 70% of Republicans. We also read a story about how a lot of people that are still with Trump may not be paying that much attention to what he's doing, so they're not aware of what he could be doing to Medicaid. But the last thing, I said this morning, I would feel remiss not to mention it again. I am so tired. I've been a reporter for so long about hearing waste, fraud, and abuse. I've heard it up at the State House here. Waste, fraud, and abuse. Going to get rid of that. Waste, fraud, and abuse here. I mean, there never turns out to be the ability. Barney Frank had a great line. The problem is that the waste, fraud, and abuse is marbled through the system, and to get at it is really difficult. Plus, when you look at Medicaid, most of the waste, fraud, and abuse is providers who are scamming the system. It's not, the guy sitting home eating chocolates and watching TV. So this idea that they're going to come up with waste, fraud, and abuse didn't work out that way for Elon Musk either.
No, it rarely does. Look, and again, the tone with which you begin these arguments and these adventures, I think, matters. And when you say with certainty, we know there's waste, fraud, and abuse, we know there are people who are 100-something years old getting Social Security, I mean, give me a break. But when you start there, it makes it really hard. Do I think that every program in the United States government could use a rub down and a scrub down?
No doubt.
Can we bring new technology to bear? Are there new ways we can do things? Can we listen to governors, and maybe the federal government does a little bit less here and a little bit more there? I mean, we should be having these conversations every day about everything. Think about your own family budget, or whatever, or think about what public radio is going through right now. If you run the risk of losing any federal assistance, your government assistance you're going to get, where are you going to make up that money, right? So we're having, adults have these conversations every day when faced with either legitimate funding challenges or potential around the corner funding challenges. That's what every family, especially every working class family in America does every single day. But we don't have adult conversations in government. We start with, this is somewhat reminiscent, and I feel almost wrong to say it, but of Ronald Reagan's welfare queens, right?
Exactly.
That was a long, long time ago. These guys talk about, thousands of people 100 years old and all this waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare and Medicaid. Is there some? Of course there is. You make a key point that a lot of it's out there in the system. It's not the individuals. Can it be fixed? Yeah, but only if you have an adult bipartisan conversation about doing it so that you have trustworthy stakeholders at the table. I've used this example before, but think about when Governor Romney, when Massachusetts first passed its health care plan, the legislature, I think they still do this, correct me if I'm wrong, they have to come back every few years and, things change, right?
Yep.
People live long, medicine changes, technology changes.
Romney care.
Yeah, you have to have stakeholders who are invested. Doesn't mean you agree with everything, but it's something you did together so that you come back at it every few years and look at it and try to, fix what has changed. Doesn't mean you got it wrong. It just means circumstances have changed. But we don't have a political system in Washington right now that is capable of looking at federal programs, especially essential federal programs like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, and in an adult way saying, okay, let's find some savings, but let's not be cruel about it. That doesn't exist.
By the way, the line we used to use when Ronald Reagan proposed getting rid of legal services for the poor when I was working in it was he practiced government by anecdote, and he was brilliant at government by anecdote. Marjorie and you were just talking about Elon Musk. I saw a story during the show on Politico, I don't know if it originated there, where Musk said he's pretty much done making political contributions for now. We know he spent $100+ million, I can't remember the precise figure, almost $200 million maybe, on the Trump campaign, spent zillions out there in Wisconsin on the Supreme Court race and lost. Is he involved in, forget the contributions, is he totally backed away from involvement in the Trump administration and Doge, John?
I wouldn't say totally, but he has transitioned himself out. You don't see him or hear him around here so much. He hasn't popped up to be the guy not in a suit at the cabinet meeting with his hat or his son. And he says he's transitioning back. I think he's doing that some ways in a way, at least to some degree, with his tail between his legs, in the sense that look, he's got plenty of money, so when Tesla stock tanks, he's still ultra rich. But I don't think his experience has been as gratifying and as rewarding as he thought it might be. Number one, back to your point about government by anecdote, government by just lies and falsehood. Go back to what they said they were saving, and then go back to what they have actually saved. And that is like A and Z. Right?
Yeah.
It's not even close to what they said they were doing and what they claimed they were doing and what they've actually done. And now you have a whole bunch of Republicans on Capitol Hill. Again, not just those Republicans in dicey districts next year, but a whole bunch of other Republicans who say, we actually have to cast votes and do some governing here. We have to try to figure this out, and it's hard. Could you please go away and shut up? Because they think he's not helpful. Because he says things that are simply not true. The president often believes them, and it just makes it, whether you agree or disagree with what the Republicans are trying to do, it is incredibly hard to make that math work, to get even close to making that math work. And so any distraction from within is not helpful, and there's a whole lot of Republicans, a lot of them publicly now, and a ton more privately, just saying, go deal with Tesla and your rocket ships, and please leave us alone.
John, we had the daughter of someone you worked with for a lot of years, David Gergen's daughter, Katherine Gergen Barnett, who's a doctor at Boston Medical Center, was with us, and we were talking about the Biden diagnosis and let me actually play this sound again. This is rather crass, but not atypical. Trump taking questions from reporters at the White House on Monday and suggesting Biden's cancer diagnosis was covered up. I should also say, on 2 occasions, he says stage 9. It's not stage 9, stage 4. But nevertheless, here's Trump.
I think it's very sad, actually. I'm surprised that it wasn't, the public wasn't notified a long time ago, because to get to stage 9, that's a long time. And it takes a long time to get to that situation. Now, I think, to get to a stage 9, I think that if you take a look, it's the same doctor that said that Joe was cognitively fine. There was nothing wrong with him.
And we have a couple of texters saying, well, golly gee whiz, seems like they cover everything except the Joe Biden cover-up today. Mainstream media, public broadcasters embarrassed. I guess the long-winded segue to the question, we have no idea as of the moment, do we, when Joe Biden knew that he had prostate cancer or that it metastasized. And Katherine said, Dr. Gergen Barnett said, it's likely that it was very recently, not only because are not recommended testing at that age, but secondly, he didn't begin treatment till recently. And one would suggest, unless you're a total masochist, you'd start treatment as soon as you know you got a problem. Do you know more than we know?
I do not, but I know what they've said publicly, and I have no reason to doubt it, in the sense that I don't have the dates in front of me, but they said he was having some urinary problems, and so he went in for testing, and that's how they discovered it, and that was quite recently. I don't have the exact dates in front of me, but quite recently, that the former president was having some issues, and they did all the okay, what could this be? And they did all the tests, and they found it, and then they do more tests, and they found out it had gone into the bones and all of that. Look, when you hear the current president, his written statements have been more gracious, where he says, I wish well, and I wish he would just stick to that. It is a legitimate debate, I believe, and there are new books and all that, to talk about, what the Biden team knew in the thing. I do think that's a legitimate debate, because I do think, if you're if you are the party of government running the government and you're not being transparent and honest with the American people, that is a fair issue. However, he's not president anymore. That belongs in the back half of our long shows and conversations. And the current president is the news right now, because he's in charge. And I just wish on this issue he would just show more grace. I just need to say this because you mentioned David's daughter. Just since you mentioned David's name, every time you do that, my heart swells up. Just what a privilege it is and was to know and work with David over the years. Just as someone who, think about the age we live in, served Democratic presidents, served Republican presidents, was a decent human being, a thoughtful human being, argued policy and politics together, always understood that policies affect human beings. And so you have to think about that and make your case. We could use more thoughtful, rational, bipartisan people in our public life today.
By the way, we should say, for those who didn't read Katherine's brilliant piece in the Globe and her discussion with us and others, she announced in the piece in the Boston Globe in mid-December that her father David had dementia, and she writes a beautiful piece.
Dementia, which is a really tough thing to go through.
Breathtakingly talented and gracious.
He was.
Being.
Yeah,
we loved him too.
But I do want to mention, getting a little bit off the pedestal here, that I think part of what's going on with people doubting when Biden knew what he knew about his cancer diagnosis, in some way they're paying the price of not being honest about the state of his mental health for all these months. And, I remember Democratic voters early on, John, and you know this better than I, were saying he's too old. We don't want him. We don't want him. We don't want him. But people went ahead with him anyway. And back when Hillary Clinton ran against Donald Trump, there was no one less popular than Hillary Clinton except for Donald Trump. So you wonder about the Democrats. That's not a good look. You know what I mean?
And I get your point, and as Jim said, it's a fair point about any skepticism now that they're telling the truth. On the one hand, I understand the Biden team's outrage, saying, please give grace to the former president. He's dealing with a crisis right now. On the other hand, I get it, right? Because they were not fully honest. They just weren't, about his condition. To your point about voters are always ahead of Washington because they live their lives and they see it, and they're more focused. They're not as focused on, you mentioned earlier, they're paying enough attention to exactly what they're talking about in terms of Medicaid or tax policy or other things. The answer to that for many people, and this is not an insult, is no, just because they're busy.
Right.
They get to it at the end, or they get to it when, some service they get in their life or some care they get in their life when someone says, well, things are changing. That's when they find out about those things. But they have eyes, and I've said this before on the air, I was blind to this issue early on because both of my parents died way too young, and that was jumped out at me from voters early on in my travels, way back, even before we got deep into the campaign year, very early in the campaign cycle. I'm not even sure it was the election year. Voters saying, do you have good eyes on this? I see this. My partner this. I lost my spouse. My wife's in hospice care. The way he walks, this and that. They're way out ahead of this town.
Yeah.
So, John, after Donald Trump hung up following his 2-hour phone call with Putin yesterday, he said, quote, excellent call. Is there any independent evidence that it was anything close to excellent in terms of outcome for those who don't want to see Ukrainians continue to be bombed and die?
None. The evidence is actually to the contrary, in the sense that the war continues and you've had some large-scale Russian drone attacks on Ukraine. And so your eyes don't lie, your ears don't lie. What you hear and see in the skies over Ukraine and Russia, Ukraine's fighting back as well too. They were attacked. The thing that got me about all of that is, Putin's talk about, trying to go back to the original reasons for the war had to be eliminated. And nobody on Team Trump said, well, the original reasons for the war is that you invaded a peaceful neighbor and tried to steal its territory and kill its people and decapitate a democratically elected government. Forgive me, I'm all, whatever the peace is, the Ukrainians will or will not accept something that might be negotiated. But part of the job of any president of the United States is to set the record straight, and Putin does not. And the original source of this war was a violent, illegal, contrary to international law, contrary to common decency, invasion of Ukraine by Putin and Russia.
Excellent call. We're talking to John King.
So the New York Times has done some reporting on the Qatar plane that the president wants to be his new Air Force One. It's not as if he originally presented it. They're talking about in the Times Trump kind of going after that plane and persuading them to make a deal with him. Is that what you understand too?
That's it's a great reporting team there, and our people who work this story have confirmed some of those details. But I trust the Times reporting. Yes, look, if you just remember, Donald Trump is many things. One thing he actually is pretty transparent. And so go back to his earliest days in politics, where he's had plane envy for some time. He has talked openly about why do I have a crummy plane as president of the United States? It's not a crummy plane. It might not be the most modern, up-to-date plane, but I haven't been on it in a while. But it's a gift and a privilege and an honor to walk up the steps of Air Force One, which I've had the chance to do on many occasions, thanks to this great work I do. My great employer is what I have to put that. But yes, he has wanted a more opulent, elegant is the word I think he likes to use, plane for some time. This is just an ethical morass. I'm sorry, I don't know any other ways to say it. And again, I think I said this last week. I would just urge anyone out there, just close your eyes and just, for Republicans out there listening who say, oh, let him do this, or, oh, what does it matter? Just imagine what, the Jim Jordans of the world, would be doing if Hillary Clinton tried this, or if Joe Biden tried this. I'm sorry. It's a bad idea. It's a bad idea. It's a dictatorship that has a history of interfering corruptly in governments and politics around the world to try to get its way. And forgive me, it's just naive to think that, I think that the Times is correct that Trump at least was part of the genesis of this idea, and B, that the Qataris are so interested in doing it. It's not a free lunch. It's actually true. There's no such thing as a free lunch.
Yeah.
John, for someone like you who's been in the business so long and I think is respected as one of the most honorable, fair journalists that any of us have ever encountered, when you see first the lead producer of 60 Minutes step down, then you see the head of CBS News step down, apparently because she's concerned that the major stockholder in Paramount, which owns CBS News, Sherry Redstone, is going to cut a deal with Trump on his meritless, according to most legal experts, lawsuit against 60 Minutes. What kind of reaction do you have after doing things with such integrity and, as I say, fairness for so long, when you see that kind of resignation in anticipation of capitulation by her boss?
Well, I'm far from perfect, so I thank you for that. I appreciate that. We're all human beings. I don't know. I don't have any eyes on the inside CBS now, but I grew up with, my dad watched Walter Cronkite, right? And that, one of my best friends when I covered the White House was the late great Bill Plant, who was one of the Cronkite boys, one of the most fabulous, Vietnam correspondent, civil rights correspondent. Yep. CBS had the legacy of just being, I was an old print guy, right, wire guy, who didn't think he wanted to work in television, right? Because I thought those were the pretty people, right? And they didn't, they didn't know how to do real reporting. CBS News had the Cronkite boys, that was the legacy, right? Those were kick-ass solid journalists, great reporters. They're having a crisis right now. I don't know Bill Owen's work as the CBS executive producer that he left, but Bill was the top CBS producer at the White House when I worked when I covered the White House for 10 years, and a damn good digging, hard shoe leather reporter of incredible journalistic integrity and decency. And so they're clearly having a crisis, and the people who view the business, I would say, like I do, don't feel at home there and don't feel comfortable there. And that troubles me because it's a great legacy network. Look, our whole business is under all sorts of evolution, revolution, and attack right now. Some of it's political, some of it's technological, some of it's transforming from the TV age to the digital age. But this seems to be greed. This seems to be, the Redstones want to sell, and they know the Trump Justice Department would have to approve that, and so they're trying to, they're willing to people I know and trust inside CBS News. Their take is that they are willing to sacrifice journalistic principles to get to this financial arrangement, and that leaves me with a hole in my heart.
Because Sherry Redstone wants the Trump administration to approve an action. Before you go, we only have 30 seconds left. Who are you more depressed about, Celtics or the Red Sox?
Well, I feel bad for Jason Tatum. I think that's it. That forces. But we're going to see now. We're going to see how Brad Stevens can play chess with the salary cap, the luxury tax, not the salary cap, but and all the roster moves and all that. The Red Sox frustrate me more. Look, the Celtics. Brad Stevens was right. They blew those first two games, right? They blew those first two games, and we'd be in a different place, and maybe that injury wouldn't have happened. I have no idea. The Red Sox are certainly better than they're playing, and I think that whether it's a management issue or shake up the roster issue, that we're not that far away from something happening on Jersey Street.
Ooh, sounds like John may know something. We'll talk to you next week and find out if you did.
Okay.
Hey, John, it's a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much for your time, John King.
Thank you, John King. Great to talk to you as always. We have been speaking with CNN Chief National Correspondent John King, the man behind the reporting project all over the map. Coming up after a quick break, we're going to need a bigger show, Jim. You know why?
Good line, Marjorie.
Because we are marking, well, I didn't write it, somebody else did. One of our producers
you read it
did a very nice job.
I should say.
Yeah.
Beautifully.
We'll mark 50 years of shark obsessions and 50 years of the movie Jaws. It is the anniversary of the debut of Jaws in 1975. It was the biggest summer blockbuster of all time. We're going to talk about Jaws and you and how you feel about the fact that there are actually real great white sharks now off the coast of Cape Cod. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, streaming at youtube.com/GBH News.
Dawn Staley has won 3 national championships as a basketball coach and 3 Olympic gold medals as a basketball player. In her memoir, Uncommon Favor, she says she's trying to pay it forward.
it's given me a life that for most, you read about a life that I have. And it's a debt that I'm trying to repay.
Coach Dawn Staley on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the Boston Speakers Series, announcing its upcoming season at Symphony Hall for 7 evenings, featuring Dr. Anthony Fauci, Ken Burns, Outliers author Malcolm Gladwell, and freed Russian political prisoner Vladimir Kara-Murza. BostonSpeakers.org. And Mass General Brigham Health Plan, ranked number 1 in member satisfaction among commercial health plans in Massachusetts by J.D. Power for the second consecutive year. Details at mgbhp.org/everyday.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan and Jim Browdy. Everybody recognizes that. We're live at the library, streaming youtube.com/GBH News. About an hour or so ago, we talked to Odie Henderson, who's the movie critic for The Globe, about this year's summer blockbusters. And we figured we'd give a chance for listeners to weigh in on the original summer blockbuster, maybe the biggest of them all. 50 years ago, I think this June, if I'm right.
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg's Jaws, that's when it hit the theaters.
You know the thing about a shark, he's got lifeless eyes, black eyes, like a doll's eyes. When he comes at you, he doesn't seem to be living until he bites you. And those black eyes roll over white, and then you hear that terrible high-pitched screaming. The ocean turns red, and in spite of all the pounding and the hollering, they all come in and they rip you to pieces.
That's incredible. That was, of course, the great Robert Shaw's Quint. Our number is 877-301-8970. Call or text. So many lasting themes for today. A defenseless, falsely accused sort of boogeyman that politicians blame for their problems. Those same pals too scared to do the right thing. Scientists stepping up to save us against all odds. And by the way, while it premiered 50 years ago, I was heartened to hear all of our staff, except for us, is well younger than 50 years old, and every single one of them has seen it. This is a movie for the generations. Give us a buzz, 877-301-8970. Obviously, it sparked a fear of water and of sharks that endures today. But 50 years after the movie, conservation efforts have actually brought great whites back to the Cape shores, for better or worse. I know it's for better. I didn't mean that. What does Jaws mean to you in 2025? 877-301-8970. So Odie Henderson was 5 when he saw it for the first time. Did you see it when it first came out?
Yeah, absolutely.
And have you seen it since?
I've seen it many times. My children say I traumatized them by getting it from the DVD store. We used to watch everything on DVDs, or before that.
And what impact did it have on you?
Well, when I was a kid, I told this before the show, when I was a kid, I had a friend, Mike, I grew up with, and I used to go out with him into the ocean, and I would scuba dive, and, go off the boat and down the Cape, and he would go catch these sharks, not big sharks, but small sharks, to take to sell, because he had it rigged up in the boat with the water going through the gills and stuff like that. I didn't think anything of it. And then after I saw Jaws, that was it.
Again?
That was the end of my scuba diving in the ocean career. No, I became hysterical. My children say I traumatized them by letting them see Jaws too early, so I feel really bad. I mean, I've even seen the documentaries. There are great documentaries about Jaws and Steven Spielberg, how it was one of his first films and how nervous he was and how, the mechanical shark kept breaking down. They had to be in shallow water so that when it broke down, they didn't have to go down like a mile to get the mechanical shark back up again. I remember seeing the actual Jaws mechanical shark.
So did I. Universal Studios in California. I didn't know you'd seen it.
I went to my graduation. We went down there to see
great.
And the shark was flying out of the water at you.
Great.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are really wrapped up. Now there's great whites on the Cape. So how about you?
Well, first of all, as you know, I've probably been to the Cape every single year, maybe with one or two exceptions since the film came out. I still am nervous about going in the water. And obviously it's when there's a great white is sighted currently, that's scary. Every single time when I'm thinking of going on the ocean side of the Cape, I think about the film. Every single time. I mean, if it's 8 times in a day, I think about it 8 times.
Yeah.
And one of the, I know people know this, but it's worth mentioning because we mentioned the conservationists. We'll play some sound from Greg Scomo, who is the shark guy, obviously, in our region, who's been on the show with us a couple of times. Peter Benchley, who wrote the book, became a great conservationist. Steven Spielberg and he, the director, obviously both felt the same way. They were both pained, they said, by the impact that the film and the book had on great whites, and they both worked really hard, particularly Benchley, to get the population restored.
Because it came out and people went on these rampages going out trying to kill white sharks for sport. Oh, Clive Weber says, this picture of the mayor. Who played the mayor?
I don't know.
The mayor of Amity. Thank you.
Mary Hamilton, John, of course.
John knows everything.
Of Amity, which is Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, it was Martha's Vineyard, Edgartown. Supposed to be, had the best sport coat in history. Reminded me of Jim in his whale pants. There's the mayor of Amity with his sport coat with all the anchors on the side. And he's trying to keep the beaches open, as everybody knows, when the chief of police is trying to tell him that you should not do that, of course, because there's a great white shark on the loose. 877-301-8970 is the number. Jaws and you. Sheila from Plymouth says, I was in high school when Jaws came out. I still have the marks from my sister's fingernails digging into my leg, and I always still scan the water when I'm in the ocean.
Read Ralph in New Hampshire, too, before we get to the Coles.
Oh, this is so true, Ralph. When the head floated out of the hull of Ben Gardner's boat in Jaws, the audience reaction was epic. I stood up and turned around to watch 200 people screaming, moaning, laughing, and sinking into their seats, trying to recover. A huge movie memory for me. Yeah, don't you remember that great scene?
I do indeed.
And they're out at nighttime, and Richard Dreyfuss is there, and he's got his big spotlight, and he's trying to find what happened to this boat, and all of a sudden, there's the head floating in the water. Oh, God, that was horrible.
George and Tiverton, you are first on Boston Public Radio. Welcome to the show. Hi.
Nice, James, nice. I actually called you yesterday and made you laugh with Bill Belichick's impersonation.
Oh, you were the guy who said you never agreed with me until Belichick.
Yeah.
And I was honored, George.
You may be getting married, George.
Welcome back.
No, I do laugh at you. You're great. I'm agreeing with you again today. Incredible fear out of that movie. I saw it at the time. We actually live down the point, and 3 years ago, one dead one washed up on our beach.
Oh.
Great white. Scomo shows up about 3 hours later with his whole team. Had put up a line to keep everybody back, and the whole beach showed up from Little Compton. Everybody was there.
That's great.
One guy finally in the crowd, he starts screaming, "Where's Pippin? Where's Pippin?" Which is I was like, what was that? The dog, right?
That's great.
I was a lifeguard 8 years on Horseneck Beach. Marjorie knows that beach.
I do.
Big beach. We used to swim. We used to get on the swim out. We used to get on the paddle boards and go 2 miles out just for fun. I wouldn't go near that now. We got boats. I'm afraid to jump in the,
Did you say?
I'm afraid to jump. We have we used to go out on the paddle boards and go a mile out and swim around. But I wouldn't do that today because they're here. And the seals out of Monomoy are so...
That's right.
The sharks figured it out to show up,
They eat
George,
the seals.
George, did you say you were a lifeguard at Horseneck? Did you say you were a lifeguard at Horseneck Beach? Oh, wow.
8 years.
Oh, I know tons of people that were lifeguards at Horseneck Beach.
Hey, George, you're a good storyteller.
Yeah,
hey, thanks.
bad undertow at Horseneck Beach.
What?
Bad undertow.
Undertow is terrifying.
Yeah.
Can we agree about that? By the way, since you and George have mentioned Greg Scomo, the legendary marine biologist, here he is with us on BPR in 2023. He's answering Marjorie's question of how the everyday person can coexist with sharks off the coast of the Cape and the islands. See if this makes you feel any more at ease.
I think the first step is to acknowledge the simple fact that the risk of an attack is extremely low. We're willing to accept a lot of risk in our lives routinely every day, just by getting in our cars, for example, where the probability of being hurt in your vehicle on the way to the beach is much, much higher than being hurt when you're at the beach. There's also drownings and riptides and all these other things out there. So put it in perspective.
Well, I'll tell you, that didn't do it for me. He is the expert. Does that calm you down when it comes to sharks? So
No.
He's right about every single word he says.
I mean, how many times they say that? Oh, a car is so much more dangerous than an airplane. Well, I'm much more scared of an airplane than I'm in a car.
So am I.
You just can't get over it. Listen to this. Tammy in Haverhill. I was 5 when the first one came out. I didn't see it at the time, but it must have been commercials or heard about it. I was terrified to even get in the bathtub.
I've heard of this.
And to make it worse, I lived in Wisconsin, nowhere near any sharks.
That's a great text.
Oh, my gosh.
Ian in Hyannis, welcome to the show. How are you, Ian?
Very good. Very well, thank you.
Thanks for calling. What's up?
So, I have 2 connections to this. My girlfriend got part of the casting call to be in the third scene, but decided when she saw the proposal...
Hey, Ian, we're going to put you on hold for a second. Don't go away.
Yeah.
Your connection's bad. Move around a little bit. We'll take another call, and we'll come right back to you. Mark and Randolph, hi.
Hi, how you doing?
Excellent, thanks.
I just wanted to say that when I saw Jaws for the first time, it really taught me respect for nature. And if you don't, it'll come back to bite you literally.
Literally. Well,
that's a good one, Mark.
That's a healthy attitude. Mark, Nan in Milford, right? Jaws means to me at the beach the same thing as Psycho did to shower curtains.
Oh, God. Yeah, that's
but
not
by the way, we
Janet
discussed
Leigh in the
this with
shower.
Odie Henderson. When you don't see the actual gore, like you never see in Hitchcock, it's actually more terrifying than seeing the scene itself, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, the opening scene of Jaws, all you see is that young teenage girl holding onto the buoy and screaming. You don't see the shark underneath the water.
Anonymous texter, not seeing the shark, exactly what you're saying, scared me more than actually seeing the shark. Should we try Ian again in Hyannis to see if the connection's any better? Can we go back to him and give him a go? Ian in Hyannis. Hello, Ian. Oops. No, we can't.
Okay.
Nancy in Pawtucket. Hi, Nancy.
Hi.
Hi.
First-time caller, long-time listener.
We love that. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm a summer kid on Martha's Vineyard. I grew up on the vineyard in the summer. I was 14 when they were filming the movie. And we used to go down off the Oak Bluffs Harbor and help them watch off those sharks because they were mechanical, most of them. And I don't think the crew from California understood that salt water and mechanics don't quite mix. Because they didn't work. They had a lot. They came in May, and they were supposed to be gone by August.
Wow.
They didn't leave till October.
Wow.
Hey, Nancy, thanks for the call. We appreciate it. An anonymous texter says, I was in college in Florida and took scuba lessons. The dive master basically said Jaws destroyed the diving industry.
Yeah, well,
No
I mean, can you be? You can't be surprised by that. I don't think. Let's go to Nancy in. Do we just go to Nancy in Pawtucket? I'm sorry.
Where are we going, Brighton?
I don't know. I was going to read this email, but now I've lost it now. Oh, I was living in Edgartown in the summer of '74 when Jaws was filmed at State Beach. I could have been an extra, but would have had to get up at 5 a.m. only to run in and out of the water. I passed, but had I only known.
Well, we know
says
somebody
Darryl
who's an
from
extra.
Belmont. Yeah, Jackie Robinson.
Jackie Robinson.
Did he run for the Senate? I think he ran for the Senate.
He may have run. Yeah, didn't he run against in the primary? Maybe against Scott Brown. He may have run for secretary.
Oh no, he didn't get far.
Of something, but he was the black kid on the beach.
That's right.
The only black kid,
That's
if I
right.
remember correctly.
That's right.
As a little boy. I don't know whatever happened to him.
I don't know what happened.
I don't mean
to him.
in the movie. I mean in
I
life.
don't know. He did not win the election.
Oh, he did. I'm so sorry. Died 8 years ago. Mary in Concord. Hi. Did we do you? No, we didn't. Hi.
Hi. How you doing?
Excellent.
Glad to be on. So I have a couple cool connections to Jaws.
We're ready.
My dad actually worked on the production. He was in transportation, and he drove the shark cross country.
Oh my God!
To California.
Oh my God!
To be at Universal Studios.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So he actually got pulled over by state troopers at one point, and they could not believe what was in the truck.
That is a great story. That is.
And I also got to be on Antiques Roadshow with some memorabilia, which was so fun.
From the film?
Yes. Yeah.
What?
I have
Like-
the director's plate or clapper, so it's like unique. It has Jaws, like shark teeth carved into it.
Oh my
So
God!
the thing they use to say action.
That is.
And we've been
Go ahead.
holding on to it till this year. Yeah.
That's a fabulous couple of stories. Mary, we're really, really glad You call. This is a good
Here's
text.
anonymous texter says, I'm 52. My 56-year-old husband still won't let me swim in the ocean because he says I'm seal-sized.
I don't think you're seal-sized, I would guess. I've seen the seal. I haven't seen you, but I don't think.
Oh, my God. That's a funny one, though, isn't it? Listen to this. I love Jaws so much. I go to the drive-in in Misquamicut. That's how I say it, Misquamicut.
I don't have any idea.
Every July 4th to see the movie. It means being a kid, a swimmer, good fear, feeling small in nature, respect for nature. Robert Shaw, the speech he ended up writing about the bomb. Good God, amazing work. I love Jaws so much. My husband and I went to New York City to see the play, The Shark is Broken, written by and starring Shaw's son.
Wasn't that it? Was that here too recently?
know.
We talked to Jared. Maybe Jared saw it in New York. I can't remember. Odie saw it too. He was talking about it. Remember? Odie Henderson talked about it. Joe in Pembroke, welcome. The reason we're not going back to Ian is the connection's still bad. Joe in Pembroke, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I think we're good. What's up?
I was on vacation in Salisbury Beach in '75, and I happened to pick up the book Jaws just because I needed something to read. And all that week, we were getting warm water from a storm at sea.
Yeah.
And I believe I kept thinking there was going to be Jaws coming in warm water from New York. I was terrified to go into the water. The waves were huge. I was 24 years old, or 25 years old. I was terrified.
I totally
but
get
we went
it.
into the water anyway.
Joe,
Joe,
thanks
thank
for
you.
the call. We appreciate it.
Listen to this. This is from Natasha in Cambridge. I was a swim instructor at summer camp in Maine in a lake. They took the kids to see Jaws. Why? I have no idea. The next day, the kids were afraid to go swimming. I tried to explain there were no sharks in the lake. It was not the ocean. But those kids were scared for life. And here's Diane from Brighton. My son Bill was 11 when he saw Jaws in Marshfield. No swimming from then till now, and Bill is 60 years old.
That is
my God.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
By the way, you know we haven't played yet? We meant to play it during Odie. We forgot. Do you guys still have queued up what is, I think, the most famous line of all time? Here it is. You all know it. You can recite it along.
You have to set it up. You have to
But you
set
said
up.
it. Please
when,
do.
When Ray Schneider, he's the chief of
Roy
police.
Schneider,
Roy
to
Schneider,
you.
chief of police. He sees Jaws when they're out. He and Richard Dreyfuss and what's his name?
Robert Shaw.
Robert Shaw are out in the ocean, and Roy Schneider finally sees Jaws.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Shut off that engine.
That was a pretty great moment.
You're going to need
a bigger boat.
Yeah, and remember Roy Schneider in the movie? I don't think he could swim. Schneider, I'm scooping this up.
Thank
Say it for
God
me, John.
John's here.
Say it for me, John.
Schneider.
Roy Schneider. Okay, sorry about
Here's
that.
a really good one. These are incredible. Pat and Dedham. Hand to God, says Pat. My wife walked down the aisle to the Jaws theme. So clearly, it is quite important. How do you make that? Pat, write us back and explain to us how she made that decision. That she wanted the...
And were you at
Was
the,
that
at
about
the altar
you,
in
or-
some Jaws suit or something? Did you bite her when she arrived?
No, you know who was, though, in a Jaws suit? Bill Belichick. He was. It's incredible. He looked fabulous. In the...
No, she was the mermaid.
Oh, she was the mermaid.
She was the
right.
mermaid.
He was the
and
fisher.
he was
the Groton
reeling her
fisherman.
in.
Right over.
Yeah, that's right. It's right.
Okay, they're getting married.
Okay.
Now, Ian in Hyannis, did we do you? Oh, no, we hung up on you, or we put you on hold because the connection was horrible. We'll try you one more time. Hi, Ian. Welcome back.
Yeah, I'm back.
Much better.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better, yeah.
Okay, I have two connections. One, my girlfriend at the time was invited to be in the crowd scenes at Jaws, but going from Hyannis to the Vineyard for that kind of effort was just not worth it. And besides that, at the time, the script looked like a turkey. No one really knew how great it was going to be.
They really know their movies, those people. What's the other one?
My other connection is my own. I mated one summer for Captain Frank Mundus, who was the original model that eventually they spent Quint on.
Well, that's pretty good. Those are pretty good, almost connections and a real connection. We're glad you called back. Thank you, Ian. We really appreciate it.
A lot of people are saying that Peter Benchley's novel, which I never read, was a lot scarier and a lot sexier, or some person said it was really too much sexually violent kind of stuff.
You know, I just realized that we totally ignored.
What?
You always say to me, it's very important to lead with the dreaded local angle, beyond the fact there was Martha's Vineyard. Who wrote the score?
Oh, John Williams.
John Williams.
John Williams. Oh, yeah.
Boston Pops John Williams.
Boston Pops John Williams. I mean, he did so many great
Last year, I
things.
think they said on the Academy Awards, I think I got this right, I may be off by one decade, that he'd won an Academy Award, I think in 8 separate decades, or at least 7. Some incredible number.
You know, it would be worth it to get you guys if we could get the music that the scores he's written. He wrote a lot of he wrote the Richard Dreyfuss movie about the spaceship too. Just to mention it to people.
Encounters of a Third Kind.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
Yeah, but he wrote a lot of them besides that.
Yeah, he's fairly good at it.
He's fairly good. He just in his 90s
He is.
just wrote something new. Joyce in Rhode Island. What do you think, Joyce?
Hello, Joyce.
Well, hello, Marjorie and Phil. Thank you for taking the call.
Our pleasure. What's up?
I always enjoy your show.
Thank you.
I have a good shark story, and it should be encouraging for you. Take a look at this.
I hope this is better for you.
Yes.
I have a good shark story. My brother was a lobster fisherman, and I had been traumatized my whole life by seeing Jaws, and figured my best strategy for not being bitten by a shark was to never go in the water.
I like it.
So I don't swim. I don't go in the water. But one day I was in the attic and I was cleaning up after my brother, and I reached into a bag of sweaters and I pulled out a bloodied hand because my brother had a shark jaw in the bag, and so I was bitten by a shark in my own attic. The point of the story is, if it's your destiny to be bitten by a shark, you can't get away from fate.
Another beautiful
That's a good
story,
one.
Joyce. Thanks for sharing that with us.
You
We
know,
appreciate
you're
it.
right about The Shark is Broken. It just finished a run at the North Shore Music Theater.
It did?
Yeah, so it's played locally. And this is a guy who says during the 70s at UMass Amherst, that string bass, doo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo. That's right.
Thank you.
It haunted all of us apartment roommates. It represented a guilty conscience. Anything lurking in our minds, anything we needed to attend to but we weren't doing, like studying or writing a paper or calling your mother, you name it, we serenaded along with it. Here it is.
It really is incredible.
It's so scary.
It's
I
so
mean, it was
scary.
just perfect. It was just perfect. He's just a genius. Yeah, listen to this.
Wait, who's
Jaws,
the genius?
John Williams. Listen to the scores he's written. Jaws, E.T., the extraterrestrial, I can't say it.
Terrestrial, yeah.
Star Wars,
Whoever he is.
Raiders of the Lost Ark,
Him too.
Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, Home Alone, Superman. My God.
I think he's a fairly talented guy.
I think he's a fairly,
He's going to break through at some point.
Harry Potter.
Oh, my God.
Aiden, thank you so much for this.
What, are you going to read everything he
Well,
wrote?
I mean, that's pretty damn impressive, isn't it?
It's impressive.
It
Well,
was-
Steven Spielberg's not bad either.
No, Steven Spielberg's not
Do you
bad
know that
either.
Peter Benchley was totally you know that no one ever heard of the guy
No one
before
heard of
he
him.
wrote Jaws.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah.
That when he sent his the
Manuscript,
novel,
we call it.
Yeah, to a publisher.
Yeah.
The person in the publishing house said, "Read this first chapter. You won't be able to put it down." And that's why they published it, because everyone agreed that once you read the first chapter, that was it. 877-301-89.
Well, we're done, Marjorie.
Oh, we
You know
are
what I mean?
done.
That's
Oh, God. I
sad.
get all excited, and then we're done.
I know, it's horrible.
Okay, we are
Why
done.
don't you do a 4th hour someday?
Is Jared going to talk to us today?
Well, he's there. It says Jared's ready on Zoom.
Oh,
That's
Jared's
generally
ready on
some
Zoom.
indication.
Oh, we can ask Jared, as we
Why don't
always
you
do.
ask Jared?
Jared, Jaws and Jared, please to tell.
Well, it wasn't. I saw it later because I wasn't around when it premiered. But I got into all the sequels and stuff. It was huge.
Yeah.
Because remember they had that succession of sequels, and then there was the 3D one that they had when it attacked the amusement park, like the SeaWorld-like amusement park.
Yes, I do. But let's be honest. Jaws 1 was the pièce de résistance, right?
Oh, of course. I have to tell you, so even, we've always had this debate too. You're an ocean person or a lake person. I always grew up going to New Hampshire. Even I didn't even want to get in the water in New Hampshire after
That's right.
even though it wasn't the ocean, because it's so terrifying.
My
We
children
had a woman
same
who
thing.
texted and said she wouldn't get in the tub because of Jaws. I've heard that before, by the way. It was terrifying.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, because of Janet Leigh, you can't get in the shower. Because of Jaws, you can't get in the tub. I guess you have to do sponge baths at the kitchen sink or something that.
It's just ruined it. By the way, I remember back in the early days of Greater Boston, Emily Rooney had Peter Benchley on, and I talked to him in the green room, and he spent so much of his life after writing that novel trying to correct course and make people understand the value of sharks. So he understood exactly how he had accidentally changed the nature of sharks the world over.
He became a great shark conservationist. I mean, a big time kind of thing,
So I take it you're not going to talk about sharks on your show today, though?
We don't know. No, but we are tomorrow. Greg Skomel's on the show tomorrow.
Greg was talking about
fantastic.
We're going to be doing a whole bunch of Jaws-related stuff coming up as we lead into the 50th anniversary. But no, we're still talking about Michelin stars, actually. So the chefs Mark Sheehan and Will Gilson will join us.
Great.
They both have worked at restaurants that became Michelin-starred restaurants, so they'll walk us through what that experience is like. Jocelyn Bio, the playwright, the Tony-nominated playwright behind Jaja's African Hair Braiding on stage now at Speakeasy Stage Company, joins us. And we'll speak to Mahesh Das about creating public spaces, because right down the street from you, a block away, there's a huge debate about the Copley Plaza Square unveiling right now.
What do you think?
Well, I'm reserving judgment until I see the thing in its entirety.
Okay.
Exactly. There's more. I mean, by the way, I'm not blowing off the criticism, but it's only half done.
It's only half done.
So let's see what the rest is.
Okay, maybe we'll get some grass in there yet. Okay.
Okay, Jared, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Jared, thank you very much.
Good luck with your show.
Okay, thanks for listening to another edition. Oh, listen to Chris in Cambridge. Between the trauma of Jaws and the Titanic, please explain why anybody would ever want to go anywhere near the ocean. Nothing but a wasteland of death. Oh, that's one way to look at it. Yeah. Thank you for listening to Boston Public Radio. Keep up with us 24/7 way of our podcast, or check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, we're going to be back here at the Boston Public Library with GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. We're so excited about that. And a transit panel about everything that's wrong with the roads and traffic and the T and the buses. Bill Straus and Chris Dempsey, and Ask the Attorney General with Andrea Campbell. She's going to be with us from 1 to 2, taking our questions and yours. We want to thank our crew. So I'm Matthews, Aidan Conley, Nicole Garcia, Hannah Loss, Aidan, thank you for all those John Williams titles. Our engineer, John the Claw Parker. John, thank you for correcting all our mistakes. Our executive producer is Jane Bologna. Special thanks to BPL staff, Maddie Geyer, Patrick Lally, Sandra Lopez Burke, our host at the Newsfeed Cafe, and across the street at the Lenox Hotel. What are you laughing at?
You're the weirdest person I've ever known. Aidan does fabulous work. Let's agree. How hard was it to type in scores and John Williams and hit enter?
Your opinion.
I mean, really.
You hear what he said?
What?
Hear what he said? Play it again,
Okay,
please.
we don't give a crap about your opinion.
Well, we know that. That's
exactly.
fine.
All right, so Jim.
Yeah.
We don't give a crap.
I'm going to Google something for you tomorrow and see if you praise me on the air.
Stay tuned to The Culture Show with Jared Bowen, starting immediately after us on 89.7 GBH. I am Marjorie Egan. You are?
I'm Jim Browdy.
You're Jim Browdy.
What do you mean?
Kind of crabby.
I am kind of crabby. That's my M.O. I know, we don't give a crap about it. Goodbye. See you tomorrow.
Thank you for listening. Hope you have a great afternoon. Bye.